Starting off our list today, we have the Lemp Mansion, and this house is legit the stuff of horror stories. The architecture of the mansion was pretty cool. It even had an underground cave the Lemp family used as a brewery. The Lemp family was composed of William, his daughter Elsa, and his 4 sons, Frederick, William Jr., Charles, and Edwin. In 1901, the first death in the house occurred. Frederick passed due to health complications. 3 years later, William Sr. took his own life when he realized he couldn't live with the grief. In 1902, Elsa was the third to go. After her divorce, she followed in her father's footsteps and took her own life using a handheld weapon. Elsa's death was then followed up by the death of William Jr., whose passing mirrored that of his father and his sister. And finally, in 1949, Charles, William's third son, killed their family dog and then himself, leaving Edwin Lamp to be the family's only survivor. When Edwin later died of natural causes, he had just one request: that every single Lemp family heirloom be destroyed. Since the death of the final Lemp, the mansion has been turned into a restaurant and inn, and it is said to be, understandably, extremely haunted. Several deceased members of the Lemp family are told to still inhabit the home, including William Jr.'s forgotten, rumored 5th son, who, story goes, was born with a defect, and so he spent his life locked in the attic until he died there, and so he began haunting it instead. Next on the list, we have the Rolling Hills Asylum. If you didn't think there would be at least a few of these on this list, I truly question your dedication to haunt culture. Anyways, the asylum was originally built as a charitable house for the poor, but it soon became home to unwed mothers, widows, orphans, the elderly, people with physical disabilities, and those suffering from mental illness, as well as the criminally insane. 17,000 deaths were reported on the property, and countless others occurred but were not reported, of course. The building was incredibly overcrowded, and patients were more often than not unable to receive adequate care while staying at Rolling Hills. Most of the time, nurses would be busy and unable to tend to the patients, but in some cases, well, one case in particular, that was probably best. Why? Well, because of one specific nurse, Nurse Emmy, who was known for her particularly cruel and gross mistreatment of the asylum's patients. Not only that, but it has been said that she was an avid participant in the dark arts, worshipping Satan and practicing satanic rituals on the grounds. Those who visit the asylum today are greeted by the unmarked graves of the many deceased patients, and they are also welcomed in by feelings of despair. It has often been reported that the maniacal laughter of Nurse Emmy can be heard throughout the building's haunted halls, and that the shadowy figures of patients past can be seen hiding around corners. I'm gonna go ahead and assume I know who they're hiding from. I mean, how crappy is that? You spent your entire life being tormented by some psycho nurse, and then you die just to spend your afterlife doing the same thing. Someone needs to call Emmy an exorcist so that those poor patients can finally be left alone. Next up, Smurl House, a house so haunted it garnered the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren, infamous paranormal investigators. In 1974, the Smurl family purchased and moved into a home located on Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. They stayed in the home for 13 years until in 1987 they finally decided they had had enough. During the course of the family's time spent in the house, they came to realize that the living were not the only ones calling the place home. Ghosts and demonic entities were said to have been sharing the place with the family as well. Janet Smurl, the mother of the household, claimed to have been violated in her sleep by one of the demonic forces, and the father, Jack Smurl, claimed to have also been violated while watching a baseball game on TV. The family also witnessed their dog being thrown violently against the wall inside of the home. So after all this, I guess they finally decided it might be time to call in the professionals, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The pair discovered that the house had been inhabited by, other than the Smurl family, not 1 or 2 or 3, but 4 ghosts: an old lady who was virtually harmless, a man who passed in the home, a violent young woman who had also passed on the property, and a demon who was in control of the other 3 spirits. Well, I guess that is all the Smurls family needed, because after hearing the news, they packed their bags and got the hell out of Dodge, vowing never to return to the home. Good choice, if you ask me. Next on the list we have the Perron house haunting, a haunting which was persistent and so terrifying that it actually inspired the 2013 horror film The Conjuring. In 1970, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved themselves and their 5 daughters into an old Rhode Island farmhouse. When they moved in, the previous owner left them with a warning: for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. I would have been out of there immediately. It didn't take long though for the Perron family to realize that something was seriously wrong with this house. Carolyn spotted the first apparition, the ghost of an old gray woman, Bathsheba, who warned the family of the home's dark secrets and told them that they needed to leave for their own safety. Again, how much warning do you need? Later, all 5 of the Perron's daughters began bonding with the spirit of a young man they called Manny, who was often seen watching them through the windows. Nameless ghosts who also inhabited the home would often rip sheets from bodies and bodies from beds, and often around 5:15 a.m. the house would be filled with the smell of rotting flesh. The family left the home, finally, but to this day remain incredibly disturbed about the incidents that occurred while they were living there. When interviewed, one of the daughters simply stated, "Let's just say there was a very bad male spirit in a home with 5 young women." Next up, at our halfway point today, we have Penhurst Asylum. The asylum was opened in 1908. It was designed as an institution for those living with intellectual disabilities, which, as we know, in 1908 included pissing off your husband, being left by your husband, not believing in God too much, smiling too much, or not smiling enough. When the asylum opened its doors, it quickly reached capacity, becoming home to 500 patients with both mental and physical disabilities. In 1957, that number jumped by 3,000, making the institution incredibly overcrowded and vastly diminishing the quality of care given to individual patients at the asylum. In fact, things became so bad and staff got so overwhelmed that patients were often kept in cages and chained to walls, and those who weren't would roam the halls half-clothed, walking in and out of overcrowded rooms while their cries, yells, and screams echoed through the halls. And patients deemed too problematic to benefit from the institution's so-called care were just killed. In 1974, the institution was hit with a lawsuit on behalf of a young woman who had suffered various unexplained injuries while under the center's care. It was found that the asylum had been in direct violation of their patients' constitutional rights, and so in 1987 it was shut down. Today it has been reopened as a haunted house, which is quite fitting, seeing as many of those who suffered torment and death on the grounds of the asylum are said to have never actually left. Next on the list, Sprague Mansion. Lots of asylums and mansions. I'm seeing a bit of a pattern here. In 1843, Amasa Sprague was killed while exiting his mansion on New Year's Eve. He was discovered the next morning face down, severely beaten. Along with that, he had endured a projectile to the wrist and a dog bite to the arm. His brother was charged for killing him and sentenced to death for his crimes, only to be proved innocent 7 years after his final breath at the gallows. Years later, Willie Sprague, grandson to Amasa, took his life in the mansion, blaming his father, Amasa's son, for his many failures. So as we can see, there are many candidates for apparitions that haunt the halls of the mansions, but funnily enough, the most well-known spirit to haunt Sprague Mansion isn't actually a Sprague, but it was a butler to a wealthy family who moved into the estate after the Sprague's departure in the late 1990s. The man had wanted his daughter to marry the son of his boss so that he may inherit the wealth of the family. Well, that never happened, but the ghost of the man insists that the estate is his regardless, and he has often been reported throwing blankets off of beds, touching visitors to the mansion, appearing as a misty white film which sends chills down the spine of those it passes through, and moving around the painted-on eyes of porcelain dolls. It's really hard to get painted eyes to move. So moving on, we've got 112 Ocean Drive, the real haunted house that inspired the 2005 horror movie Amityville horror. In 1974, the home located in Amityville, Long Island, became the scene of an incredibly gruesome mass killing. Robert J. Defoe Jr. killed his entire family in their sleep. One by one, he entered the rooms of his parents and then all 4 of his siblings and ended their lives by firing projectiles from a handheld weapon. Ronald was given 6 life sentences for his crimes, and he spent an impressive 47 years behind bars before he died. After the killings took place, the house sat on the market for a while until it was eventually sold to the Lutz family at an incredibly discounted price. First, red flag, if you ask me. They lasted 28 days in the home before they fled. During their time, George Lutz, the family's stepfather, who had a history of exploring occult practices, would wake up every morning at 3:15 a.m., the exact time Ronald carried out the killings. The family also reported strange smells, seeing green slime oozing out of the walls and keyholes and cold spots. They often also heard the sounds of garage doors opening and closing. They saw kitchen blades getting knocked off the shelves by unseen spirits, and they also saw a pig-like creature with bright red eyes staring at George and his son Daniel through the windows. Not only that, but on many occasions, the family members witnessed each other levitating above their beds. They decided enough was enough and called in a priest. While in the home, the priest heard a voice screaming, "Get out!" He instructed the family not to enter the room in which the voice had originated, but the family did him one better. They decided to get out of the home altogether. I really can't blame them. I don't understand why they did it sooner. I don't understand why they bought it in the first place, to be honest. Next up, we have Waverly Hills Sanatorium, a massive hospital used to care for patients suffering from tuberculosis in the early 1900s, and the death place of at least 63,000 patients. No wonder some people have referred to this place as the holy grail of haunted houses. At its peak, the sanatorium was vastly overcrowded, housing 400 patients in wards designed for a maximum of 40. It was impossible to get good care with those numbers, and so, as you can imagine, most patients weren't actually cared for at all. And they were dying quicker than the hospital staff could deal with them, which of course led to the innovation of what some historians refer to as the body chute, an underground tunnel that was used to remove dead bodies from the institution and keep them out of view from the living patients. While the entire hospital is said to be haunted, it makes sense that the most spiritual activity tends to happen in the place where bodies were piled up like hay bales and left to rot. In fact, the area is considered to be so haunted that it was featured in 2 separate episodes of Ghost Hunters, and hundreds of people who have visited have reported sightings in the building, as well as reported hearing strange noises coming from the walls. Next on our list today, we have the Villisca Axe House, home to the Villisca Axe killings and the inspiration behind the 2016 horror film, The Axe Killings of Villisca. In 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with 2 house guests, their 3 sons, and 1 daughter, stepped out of their family home to attend a service at their church. After the service, they returned home. It was then that they entered their house for the very last time. At some point between the group of 8 stepping through the front door that evening and the neighbors checking on them the next morning, all individuals staying at the Villisca home were killed brutally with an axe. They were found dead in their beds, covered in slash marks and deep wounds. Many people were tried for the crime, but ultimately no one was convicted, and the killer's identity to this day has yet to be determined. The house sat empty for a long time, the neighborhood plagued with the tragic loss of 8 of its well-respected members. But eventually the property was turned into a tourist attraction open for tours. Those who enter the house are greeted by the mournful whispers of the past victims, who can sometimes be seen in the shadow of the home as well.
Number 10. Satan's Castle, San Bernardino. Yes, this place is called Satan's Castle, and it's a no from me. Satan's Castle sits on a mountainous region that is filled with both religious and satanic lore dating back to the 19th century. There are said to be underground tunnels linking to various points of interest across the mountain, which were used during the Prohibition era. These tunnels were created mostly for transportation and smuggling booze, but also served for darker purposes. One of these tunnels is rumored to to connect a Catholic church to Satan's castle. It is said to have been the grounds for dark, ritualistic practices which included both human and animal sacrifices, along with other dark ceremonies. Not to mention, inside one of the rooms a pentagram used to be painted on the ground. Local Christians painted over it with the John 3:16 verse, but the pentagram always bled through. Definitely sounds satanic to me, and I will not be visiting there. Number 9. Preston Castle, Ione. The Preston School of Industry, also known as Preston Castle, was a reform school that opened in June 1894 and was considered one of the oldest and best known reform schools in the United States. The boys there grew their own food, raised livestock, and learned farming trades. Additionally, there was a print shop, bakery, and cobbler shop where the boys could learn skills for self-preservation in the real world. The superintendent controlled the life inside the school, and discipline was extreme. Starvation, isolation, and public paddling and lashings, and severe strategies were common at Preston. Now, this school has seen a lot of death. There are 17 men buried on the school grounds because they died there. Samuel Goines had his life ended after attempting to escape from the school. In 1950, Preston's head housekeeper, Anna Corbin, was beaten to death in the school's basement as well, and they never found out who did it. Employees and visitors believe that these young men are still haunting the school, which only closed in 1960, by the way. Those who have toured the grounds since have reported many strange sights and sounds, slamming doors, falling objects, disembodied voices, and ghostly physical contact. Number 8. Camp Pendleton, Area 41, San Diego. Camp Pendleton is a coastal Marine Corps base with a dark history. This place is divided up into sections, and Area 41 is haunted. Locks have been tampered with, furniture displaced, items gone missing, and strange noises are heard throughout the camp. Many think that this is done by one broken-hearted Marine in particular. This man was in love and had recently asked his girlfriend to marry him. After she had said yes, he thought his life was going great, but it didn't last long. The Marine was in his housing unit when his fiancée got a hold of him and told him that she was ending the relationship. He was so upset that he ended his life in a second-story room of the barracks. Now, some Marines are convinced his spirit remains in the area and haunts Area 41 in particular. A general feeling of unease is common here, and to this day, Marines claim that they hear the faint sound of a man softly humming the Jeopardy game show theme song around the grounds. I'm sorry. What? Number 7. The Hotel de Coriando, San Diego. Hotel de Coriando is a historic hotel that opened in 1888. Kate Morgan has haunted this hotel since 1892, the year she checked in and awaited the arrival of her husband. The two were traveling con artists, and not surprisingly, her husband never showed up, and 4 days later, Kate was found dead at the bottom of an outdoor staircase leading to the Coronado Beach. Today, those who check into Kate's room, which is now room 3312, have had spooky experiences to say the least. Curtains blowing even though the windows are closed, objects moved by unseen hands, murmuring sounds, and even sightings of Kate walking down the hallways and peering out the windows have all been reported. Her ghost is often seen both in the hotel and on the beach. Now, room 3519, formerly room 3502, is also haunted. Once a maid's room, it's been the site of numerous paranormal occurrences, such as objects moving around by themselves. Number 6. The Whaley House, San Diego. The Whaley House is the oldest brick structure in Southern California and was the home of Thomas Whaley and his family. At various times, it also housed Whaley's General Store, San Diego's second county courthouse, and the first commercial theater in San Diego. The house has witnessed more history than any other building in the city, and it is extremely haunted. One of the most infamous ghosts there is the spirit of Yankee Jim Robinson. Yankee Jim was hanged in the gallows where the house now stands in 1852 after being convicted of stealing horses. Thomas Whaley himself, who owned and lived in the house with his family years later, said they could hear heavy footsteps going up and down the stairs. Now, visitors have reported cold spots and the feeling of their chest and throat throat tightening within the home. Others claim to have seen Yankee Jim 2, an apparition that appears and disappears when you get too close. Today, and for many years, visitors to the house have also reported seeing Thomas. They usually see him wearing a frock coat and pantaloons standing on the second-story landing. Others have seen his wife Anna, usually floating around in the garden or the downstairs room. Her ghost, which appears white and billowy, seems to just drift about and then disappears. Number 5. Winchester Mystery House, San Jose. Now, after finding out what this place is, I really want to visit here. I mean, just by the name Mystery House, it's cool. Now, some backstory on the house. Sarah Winchester lived a tragic yet interesting life. She married William Wirt Winchester in 1862, who was a very wealthy man. Sadly though, her husband, mother, and father-in-law all passed away within the same year. To deal with her grief, she moved to California after gaining a large inheritance from her husband. Then, on top of all of that, Sarah was being haunted by the spirits of those whose lives were ended by the Winchester rifle, which her husband's company had invented. After her husband passed away, a psychic told her to evade the spirits. She would need to move out west, buy a home, and build non-stop. She took 36 years to construct the home, and this house has 6 kitchens, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 17 chimneys, 160 rooms, and many doors and stairs that lead to nowhere. Workers and visitors swear they hear howling at night, loud creaking, and sometimes the kitchen smells like someone is actively cooking. But regardless if you believe in ghosts or not, the house is absolutely stunning. Number 4. Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, Los Angeles. The Hollywood Roosevelt is considered to be one of the most haunted hotels in Los Angeles. It first opened its doors in 1927 and was a frequent home to Marilyn Monroe, who often stayed in the second floor cabana. Interestingly, the doors to this hotel are still open, allowing visitors to spend the night in Marilyn's suite, and some people claim to have seen Marilyn's ghost smiling and blowing kisses at them in their hotel mirrors. Hotel workers often talk about seeing the ghost of Charlie Chaplin and feel temperatures drop quickly from one room to the next. The apparition of Montgomery Clift has been blamed for patting guests' shoulders and watching maids in room 928, where he stayed for 3 months while filming From Here to Eternity. The ghost of Carole Lombard has also been spotted floating around the upper floors, and in the Blossom Room, where the first Oscars were held, 2 ghosts have been spotted, a presence of a tuxedoed man and a presence of a man in a white suit. Seems like if you want to meet a dead celebrity, the Roosevelt Hotel is the place to go. Number 3. Alcatraz, San Francisco Bay. The famous maximum security prison Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary earned a reputation as one of the most brutal and inhumane prisons in the country during its day. The strong currents around the island and cold water temperatures made escape nearly impossible, and the prison became one of the most notorious in American history. The prison closed in 1963, and the island is now a major tourist attraction. A total of 36 prisoners made 14 escape attempts, 23 were caught alive, 6 had their lives ended by guards during their escape, 2 drowned, and 5 are listed as missing and presumed drowned. Now, during its 29 years in use, Alcatraz held some of the most notorious American criminals, including Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Bumpty Johnson. Today, it's a tourist attraction that many believe to be haunted. Inexplicable events happen, like the sound of someone playing the banjo. Many believe this to be the spirit of Al Capone, who spent his last days at the prison playing a banjo in the shower room to avoid being injured in the yard. The smell of smoke, the sounds of cell doors slamming, disembodied voices, moaning, and screams have also all been reported. Number 2. Queen Mary, Long Beach. Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed from 1936 to 1967. She sailed to the port of Long Beach, California, where she is permanently docked. The city of Long Beach bought the ship to serve as a tourist attraction, featuring restaurants, a museum, and a hotel, but claims were made that the ship was haunted. There are resident spirits, including Jackie, the little girl who haunts the first-class pool, John Petter, who was crushed by a watertight door, Senior Second Officer William Eric Stark, who accidentally drank dry cleaning fluid instead of gin, and the cook, who was baked alive by his own kitchen staff during World War II. But most arguably, the most notorious location on the ship for paranormal activity is room B340. Reports claim someone was knocking on the door in the middle of the night, bathroom lights turning on by themselves, the sink faucet turning on and off on its own, and unexplained bathroom doors shutting. Some guests have reported the covers of their bed being pulled off while asleep and waking to see a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. There are even more stories about this place, but I don't have enough time to fit them all in. If you're really interested in Queen Mary, I say do some homework on it because it definitely gets creepier. And coming in at number 1 is the Cecil Hotel, Los Angeles. The Cecil Hotel opened in 1925 as a well-furnished hostelry frequented by respectable people, but that didn't last long. As downtown became more and more dangerous, the Cecil became a place where bad people stayed, like the Night Stalker aka Richard Ramirez and Austrian killer Jack Unterweger spent time there. The Black Dahlia was rumored to have had her last drink at the hotel bar before she turned up dead a few miles away. In 1962, Pauline Otten jumped from the 9th floor window, ending her life. That same year, Julia Moore jumped from an 8th floor window, and Helen Green from the 7th floor in 1954. The Cecil Hotel may have rebranded itself recently as the Stay on Main, but it just can't shake its reputation as a place where scary things happen. In 2013, the body of Canadian tourist Elisa Lam was found in the hotel's rooftop cistern. Her body was discovered by a hotel maintenance worker investigating complaints of flooding and low water pressure. And yes, people had been showering in and drinking that water. Ugh. And last but not least, the ghost of a boy has reportedly been photographed outside a 4th floor window. Spooky.
At number 9, we have the East Tahang Glass Walk. The bridge in the Tahang Mountains is both thrilling and terrifying. The glass platform is 3,800 feet in the air and is affixed to the mountainside. If you had vertigo, you would not be feeling so great standing on this glass-bottomed walkway staring down into the abyss. There are videos of people literally freaking out as they walk over the bridge. Fear and panic sets in, but even worse, the bridge features a joke cracking effect that's caused people to heavily freak out. Not only that, the cracking effect comes with sound that would really get me. A lot of people have hailed the effect as extremely cruel and dangerous, but China doesn't care. Coming into number 8, we have the Delinga test sites. Not that you could get anywhere near it, but Delinga County is home to a worrying nuclear test site. 12 years ago, Delinga was totally out of limits to foreigners. These days you can go there, but the bases in the northern reaches of the country are army patrolled. Even if they weren't, you really wouldn't fancy wading into a nuclear wasteland. There are 36 launch pads in and around Delinga. Coming into number 7, we have the North Korean border. The North Korean border is a dangerous place to be for obvious reasons, and it would be even scarier if you were alone. There are some reports that the Chinese military might be up to something over there too. Border regions are always sensitive places to be, but the river that separates China and North Korea at Dedong is particularly so because it's so small. As a non-Asian, you may encounter some issues at the area. While the Dedong and Bridge of Friendship area is safe enough for careful tourists, there are some parts of the China-North Korea border which are not very well defined. Accidentally strolling into North Korean territory is a genuine risk. Coming into number 6, we have the Lotus Pond. The Lotus Pond in the University of Hong Kong looks like a place I would love to visit. It's beautiful. I can imagine sitting here and doing some quiet reflection. I'd probably be alright doing this, but if you're a man, you shouldn't ever come here alone. The pond is at the centre of a ghost story involving a lost love. A young couple who would meet by the pond planned to run away together. The girl arranged to meet her love by the pond at midnight, and they were about to start their journey, only he didn't show up. As she headed home, worried and devastated, she saw her boyfriend with another girl. She burst into tears, and in her anguish she threw herself into the pond and drowned. To this day, if a man is walking alone by the pond at midnight, he should be very careful. If he sees a girl, he shouldn't talk to her, as the story goes that the girl's ghost appears after the stroke of 12 and looks to drag men into a watery grave if they engage with her. Coming into number 5, we have Chennai number 81. This terrifying building building is located in Beijing and is at the center of a lot of mysticism. The building is sometimes known as the Chinese Church, and it is thought that it used to be used for religious purposes before it was taken over by the communists. The house used to be owned by a Nationalist Party officer, but he then fled to Taiwan, leaving his wife. She in turn hung herself at the home, and her screams are said to be heard wailing out to this day. Again, to this day, the house, which is supposed to be prime real estate, is abandoned and overgrown with ivy. Why? Some say that a number of those who have entered the house have simply not left. Guessing you absolutely don't want to go here alone. This scary house was the setting for a Chinese horror film in 2014 called The House That Never Dies. Rightio then. Coming into number 4, we have the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of the former Chinese emperor Qin Shi Huang was discovered when the Terracotta Army was unearthed. The emperor was largely considered to be the first ever emperor of China, having unified 6 fighting states. His death in 210 BC was a big deal, and he entered the afterlife with terracotta replicas of his army, his horses, his family, and his servants. The Terracotta Army was discovered in 1974 in Xi'an and was a pretty special place. It's a great place to visit, but definitely very eerie. The thing is that the actual mausoleum, the burial chamber of the emperor, is out of bounds, and it always has been. The Chinese government simply will not let you in. Now, excavations are banned, and if you were caught there, you would have to answer to armed guards. Beyond that, who knows what spooks lay in wait. It is said that the earth near the tomb is also booby-trapped. On top of that, we all know what happened when the Egyptian tombs were opened. You don't want to be dealing with that level of pestilence, especially not alone. Coming into number 3, we have Subway Line 1. In Beijing, I would be pretty terrified to ride Subway Line 1 alone. The line was first constructed in 1965, and its build was fraught with accidents, including broken equipment and injury or death to workers. It seems that the original build disturbed souls whose graves were disturbed as construction was taking place. As a result, monks were brought in to pacify the spirits. The monks promised the spirits that the metro would close before 11 PM, as it said the dead really like resting between 11 and 1 AM. Right. Honestly, is this just the government's way of taking night trains off the menu? To add spookiness to an already potentially haunted situation, there are 4 ghost stations along Subway Line 1, 2 of which are located in a military region. An abandoned station on a haunted train line. Honestly, rather you than me. Coming into number 2, we have the Forbidden City. China's Forbidden City is said to be deeply haunted. The Forbidden City is an imperial palace from the Ming dynasty to the Qing dynasty. The World Heritage Landmark gets its name from a time when public entrance was forbidden except for the members of the imperial family. The complex has seen some ghastly things over the years, including numerous executions and murders. Since 1925, the Forbidden City has slowly been opening up to visitors, and now 75% of it is available for viewing. However, there are still some secret rooms and courtyards that you're not allowed to visit. The chances of you being alone in the day in the city are pretty slim, seeing as there's around 16 million people visit every year, but at night, well, that's a scarier time altogether. Night staff have reported some terrifying things going on, including strange animals, ghosts, dogs, ghost dogs as well, menacing presences, and a weeping woman in white. I honestly really wouldn't fancy being alone here at night. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert borders China and Mongolia and is not a place to be visited solo. Aside from deserts being stressful places for solo trips anyway because of the harsh elements and the isolation, this desert is in particular pretty extreme. It's said to be home to the legendary Mongolian deathworm, which doesn't sound like a thing I want to party with. The Mongolian deathworm first came to light in the West when explorer and naturalist Roy Chapman Andrews wrote about his expedition into the Gobi in 1926. It's said to be between 2 and 5 feet long, so up to 1.5 meters. Reports have said it's supposed to be shaped like a sausage with neither head nor tail. It's poisonous and touching it could induce death. Not only that, some accounts say that the worm spews deadly sulfuric acid and emits a strangely deadly electrical charge. Venturing into a desert on your own is a bad idea, but how would you face the Mongolian deathworm solo?
And we're starting off this list with the Comedy Store in West Hollywood. The Comedy Store in West Hollywood had a reputation for being haunted for a long time due to a slew of reported supernatural experiences and encounters. Staff, comedians, and patrons have shared stories of unexplained sounds, shadowy figures, and eerie sensations while in the building, especially in the basement. Footsteps have been heard echoing in empty halls, and snarling sounds have also been reported. Some attribute these occurrences to the building's past, as it was formerly a nightclub called Zero, a very hip place in the 40s and 50s, but with ties to the mob, and the basement is where a lot of problem people were dealt with. Tragic events that have taken place there over the years may have left behind some lingering energy. Visitors have described sudden drops in temperature, objects moving on their own, and a general sense of someone or something watching them. The Comedy Store's paranormal stories have become so well known that there are even ghost tours of the club's supposedly haunted basement nowadays. Number 9, the Warner Pacific Theater, now called the Hollywood Pacific Theater. This historic building is said to be haunted by Sam Warner, one of the Warner brothers, who put a ton of hard work and money into opening this theater, the first to be built for sound. In 1927, the theater was going to hold the premiere for the Warner Bros. Produced film, The Jazz Singer, the very first sound film, or talkie as it was referred to at the time, but there were construction delays, so the film was going to have its premiere in New York instead. But just one day before this big premiere, Sam Warner would collapse, dead of a cerebral hemorrhage. He never got to hear the reviews, he never got to enjoy the fruits of his labor, but some have reported feeling his ghostly presence in the theater to this very day, or even catching a glimpse of his ghostly presence making his way through the building. The elevator has been seen going up and down by itself, and apparently Sam's ghost likes moving things around in his old office or even scratching at the door. Number 8, we have the Hollywood sign itself. Legend has it that the ghost of Peg Entwistle, an aspiring actress in the 1920s and early 30s, roams the area near the sign. Peg Entwistle was a struggling actress who never really made it. On September 18, 1932, a hiker discovered a shoe, purse, and jacket close to the sign. They soon found her body in a ravine below the sign, and it was determined that Entwistle had climbed a workman's ladder and jumped from the letter H of the sign. It's said that her spirit still haunts the area to this day. Some say they spotted a ghostly figure or felt a cold breeze on the path leading to the sign. Locals and hikers have reported sensing an unexplainable presence or catching a glimpse of a ghostly woman in old-fashioned clothing ascending the hill as nighttime falls over the Hollywood Hills. Some claim to hear faint echoes of her footsteps or hear her cries carried by the wind. Next on the list we have Griffith Park. The sprawling urban park is known for its fun attractions and natural beauty. I mean, it is a park after all. Covering over 4,000 acres, the park offers a mix of hiking trails, picnic areas, the iconic Griffith Observatory, and even a zoo, although it's abandoned. But aside from all that nice stuff, Griffith Park has also a reputation for being haunted. Legend says that the land was cursed in 1863 by a girl named Donna Petronella, whose uncle, a wealthy land baron, cut her out of his will. And one of the most famous haunted spots within the park is the Griffith Observatory itself, sitting on a hill overlooking the city. This historic landmark has had a number of ghost stories associated with it. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving about the observatory after hours, while others report hearing unexplained footsteps echoing throughout the halls. Another haunted hotspot is the old zoo area, abandoned in sometime in the 1960s or late 50s. The dilapidated remnants of cages have fueled tales of these ghostly animal sounds and the figures of former zoo inhabitants. Ghost animals. I've never heard that one before, though. I like it. Local lore also says Griffith Park has some darker stories, including alleged occult activity. Number 6, the Colorado Street Bridge. The Colorado Street Bridge in Pasadena, California has a spooky reputation due to its sad history. It was completed in 1913, and it's a gorgeous bridge, but it's known for more than just its impressive looks. Back during the Great Depression, a lot of people ended their lives on the bridge, which has led to its pretty on-the-nose nickname. You can probably imagine what it is. So, because of these tragedies, folks started telling stories about the bridge being haunted. People who have been there talk about strange things like ghostly apparitions and shadows that don't make sense, or hearing whispers or disembodied voices. There's one story about a woman being seen crossing the bridge, cars swerving in order to avoid hitting her, only for the woman to vanish out of thin air. Stories like this have made the bridge pretty famous in books, movies, and even TV. And at number 5, we have the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. First used in 1899, there are tons of Hollywood celebrities buried there, and it's still an active cemetery to this day. It's also said to be incredibly haunted. Are there any cemeteries that aren't haunted though? Visitors have reported all kinds of paranormal activity here. You have your standard haunted place, like kind of stuff, cold spots, disembodied voices, semi-translucent people roaming around. But one that comes up a lot apparently is that of a woman crying by a lake on the cemetery grounds. Of course, she vanishes when you approach her. I do imagine there is plenty of crying going on in a cemetery because of all the dead people, but this is different. Next up, we have Grauman's Chinese Theater. This is probably one of the most famous movie theaters in the world. Its forecourt has concrete tiles with the handprints and signatures of various different stars, and the building itself takes inspiration from ancient Chinese architecture. The theater was opened by Sid Grauman in 1927, and apparently he had built hidden rooms in the theater for his famous friends to party in, and there was like a buzzer system that would allow them inside these rooms. Those hidden rooms have since been sealed off, but one famous story tells of an employee in the 90s who kept hearing buzzers going off in some of these old secret rooms, although the buzzers had long been disconnected as well. There's also said to be the ghost of a former employee of the theater named Fritz, who took his own life behind the movie screen. And there's also apparently a ghost of a young girl in old-timey clothing named Annabelle, who roams about the theater at night. Coming in at number 3, we have the Pantages Theater. This theater, located in the heart of Hollywood, is a historic building with a reputation for being haunted by ghouls and ghosts. Built in 1930, the theater has hosted a variety of performances over the years, vaudeville acts, films, and back in 1949, Howard Hughes, the millionaire aviator, took control of RKO Studios and its main theater, Pantages. He set up his fancy offices in the second floor, and his presence is often still felt even today, apparently. Hughes seems to have a unique signal, the smell of cigarette smoke, which seems to announce his arrival, although he disliked smoking. A ghostly apparition of him, tall and thin in a simple suit, has been reported being seen walking through a wall that used to be his office doorway. But he's not the only specter said to haunt the building. In 1932, a woman passed away in the mezzanine during a show. Over time, people started hearing a woman's voice singing in the theater, sometimes during the day and even late at night after everyone left. The staff had a theory. The woman might have been an aspiring singer who came to enjoy musicals in the 30s. Now she seems to be living her dream by performing on stage herself. Engineers have even caught her voice on a live performance microphone in one show, even though no one could actually see her on stage. Coming in at number 2, we have the Cecil Hotel. If you have any interest in haunted buildings or just creepy internet content, there's no doubt that you've heard of the Cecil Hotel. This historic hotel, now an affordable housing complex known as the Stay on Main, is pretty famous for a series of dark incidents. A lot of deaths have taken place there, and the circumstances of some of them are quite mysterious, some of which have never even been solved. Probably the most famous case this building is connected to is Elisa Lam, who had gone missing for a while with nothing but footage of her kind of erratic behavior captured in one of the elevator's security cameras. Her body was eventually found, however. She had managed to make her way to the roof, where she fell into an open water tank. She was discovered after guests had reported their water running black and having an odd taste. The Cecil was also home to some pretty notorious people, like the Night Stalker himself, Richard Ramirez. There are so many dark stories surrounding this place that many believe it to be haunted by countless spirits of those who met their end within its walls.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Siu Lam Hospital. This hospital was built in 1972 and was designed to specialize in mental health treatments as well as physiotherapy. The designs for the building began in the 60s, and the building was created with quite a few structural issues. There were often leaky roofs that led to infection control issues within the hospital, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to happen in a hospital. They were usually understaffed, which led to the patients being given extremely high doses of oral sedatives in order to keep all the patients calm and to avoid any violent outbursts. But, of course, aside from the ethics of that practice, this would lead to substance dependence problems, which in turn led to more violent outbursts. There was a focus on security in this hospital, which could be a good thing, but it truly was taken overboard, and it ended up being more like a prison, which is extremely detrimental to those who are trying to heal. In 2012, the original Siu Lam building was abandoned and the hospital moved to a new location in Castle Peak. In our number 9 spot today, we have the King Chung Psychiatric Rehabilitation Hospital. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This hospital is located in Shanghai and has a lot of history of holding patients long past their recovery. The most well-known case of this is the case of Su Wei. In 2001, Su Wei began to exhibit some symptoms of mental illness, and upon evaluation, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was treated for a short while and then released back to his family. In 2003, Su got in an argument with his father and ended up hitting his father, which of course was not okay, and his father ended up taking him to the King Chung Hospital. In 2008, Su's father passed away, so his guardianship was passed on to his brother, and since that year, Su has expressed his wishes to be released from the hospital, but his brother will not sign the discharge papers, so Su was kept in the facility for years against his will. He was even declared rehabilitated, but they still would not let him leave, which I can only imagine took an enormous toll on his mental health that he had been working so hard on. In 2013, Su finally got the assistance he needed from a lawyer and sued both his brother and the hospital, but after a year of delays, his case was rejected. Finally, after 3 more years of appeals, Su was finally declared to have full civil capacity and was finally released. It is so sad that Su was held for years against his will, all because of a mental illness that he took the steps to get under control, but I am so glad he was able to recover and finally be released. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Haidian District Mental Health Prevention and Treatment Hospital. This hospital is in the Haidian District, which is mostly in northwestern Beijing. Not a lot has come out about this treatment facility in terms of what goes on a day-to-day basis, but there is a huge and important question that has to do with this facility. In 2012, China passed its first mental health law that aimed to prevent people from being involuntarily held at psychiatric facilities. Unfortunately, though, this law still allows people to be sent in by their families and doesn't necessarily give them the ability to leave on their own free will, which seems like a huge oversight. In 2013, it was said that there were 300 in-house patients at the hospital. Out of the 300, apparently 150 of them met the medical requirements for discharge, but they weren't allowed to go home. It isn't exactly clear why, but it certainly is something to be looked into, considering that is half of the people there. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Third Hospital of Zhuzhou. The Third Hospital of Zhuzhou is of course located in Zhuzhou, which is in the Hunan province of China. I hope I said that right. This hospital tends to keep its inner workings secret, but there is one story that came out that definitely shocked a lot of people. In July of 2018, a woman named Dong Yao Chan live streamed a video of her throwing paint onto a billboard that depicted the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. In the video, she also accused the Chinese Communist Party authorities of thought control. Shortly after this video was streamed, Dong made a tweet that said that there were a bunch of uniformed people outside of her Shanghai home. Then the account went totally silent. A year later, Dong's father finally gave an update and explained that his daughter had been taken into the Third Hospital of Zhuzhou's women's ward after the live stream, and she was just now being released. He expressed his concern over her heavy medication, and he described her after the release as lacking vitality. I, of course, am not a doctor, but Dong was being given antipsychotic drugs that are used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, despite not being diagnosed with either, which just doesn't quite seem right. It is certainly worrisome that she was taken and treated and medicated at the hospital for an entire year, despite not being admitted either voluntarily or even by family. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Chaoyang District Mental Health Service Center. The Chaoyang District Mental Health Service Center is certainly one of the better ones on today's list, which may be in part due to the fact that it is privately owned. The center is located on the outskirts of Beijing, and it provides services as well as housing for those who are mentally ill. The center originally opened in 1999 and has been growing and increasing its numbers of residents since then. 2/3 of the people at this facility only reside here because their families have either become overwhelmed with their care or they simply have just given up on them, which is very sad. Because of the fact that this center is private, it also lacks a lot of funding, so it does not include a lot of necessary and beneficial services such as counseling. The center mainly acts as housing, which is of course very important, and they are able to give out medication. With more funding, they would certainly be able to provide more care and services to the residents, as well as be able to expand their capacity. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Fuzhou Psychiatric Sanatorium. The Fuzhou Psychiatric Sanatorium has a very similar issue to the Haidian District Mental Health Prevention and Treatment Hospital that we talked about before. With the China mental health law overlooking the fact that patients should be allowed to leave on their own free will, it is extremely difficult to be discharged from this hospital without a family member consenting to it. At least half of the patients in this sanatorium have been able to recover and meet the requirements needed in order to be sent home, but their family or those who have, for some reason, been deemed necessary to look after the patients after their discharge are not willing to authorize these patients' release from the hospital. If someone is meeting all of the necessary requirements, it seems pretty unfair that the fate of their life would be left up to someone else, especially since there is seemingly no reason for them to continue living in a mental health facility. I can't imagine how being held captive would affect your mental health, especially when it's something you've already struggled with. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Wenzhou of Conning Hospital. The Wenzhou of Conning Hospital seems to not necessarily be a hospital that is actively doing some questionable things, as far as I know, but because of the way mental health and mental illness are sometimes viewed in China, it is facing a bit of a dark issue. The director of the hospital has explained that over half of the patients' relatives are reluctant to take them home once treatment has been completed. This is a huge problem because these people will just be forced to stay in the care that they no longer need, and they're lacking the option to have autonomy over their own choices. I honestly am unsure if the hospital has to release patients to family members, or if it has just been so customary to do so that there's a fear of letting patients leave on their own accord. Whichever it is, it certainly seems like it might be time for something to change. In our number 3 spot today, we have the High Street Community Center. The High Street Community Center is located in Hong Kong and was home to some extremely gruesome acts and is said to be very haunted. The building was created in 1892 and was originally used as the quarters for the European nursing staff by the civil hospital, but once World War II rolled around, this was the site where a lot of rebellious locals were tortured and executed by soldiers. After the war, this building became a mental hospital and was the only one of its kind at the time. In 1961, the hospital turned into a day treatment center for psychiatric outpatients until 1971. For the next 20 years, the building was abandoned, but that of course didn't stop trespassers, which led to all of the ghost stories being spread. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, just knowing the horrors that the building had seen would be enough to give you an eerie feeling. But for those who do believe, it is said that a woman can be heard crying, you can hear mysterious footsteps in the distance, but some people have even said that they've actually seen a headless ghost, and others say that they've witnessed a ghost burst into flames. All in all, I think this might be one building I'd just like to stay away from. In our number 2 spot today, we have the 4th Hospital of Linyi. The 4th Hospital of Linyi is a mental hospital located in Linyi, which is in the Shandong province of China. There is one major problem going on at this hospital, and that has to do with the hospital's deputy chief, Yang Yongshin. Yang is a clinical psychiatrist best known for his practice of electroconvulsive therapy without the use of any anesthesia or muscle relaxants. He claims his practices can help cure adolescents of internet addictions, and he unfortunately runs the Internet Addiction Treatment Center at the hospital. Yang's treatments would cost families around $800 a month and would combine this electroconvulsive therapy with psychiatric medication, which was eventually dubbed the brain brain-waking treatment. Eventually, the Chinese Ministry of Health banned this treatment, which seems like the right thing to do, but now the doctor uses a new treatment that he came up with called low-frequency pulse therapy that his patients have said is much more painful than his previous treatment. Yang continues to be an extremely controversial psychiatrist, with people dubbing him as the devil still at large. One random but interesting fact I found while researching for this video: if you are a fan of the game Dead by Daylight, you might know the Doctor character, and apparently this character, whose power is shocking the survivors, which alters their minds, is actually modeled after Yang. I'm not 100% sure if that is true, but I read about it and I just had to include it in this video because I wanted you guys to know that fact with me. Well, it's maybe not a fact. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Beijing Anking Hospital. The Beijing Anking Hospital is of course located in Beijing in the Fangshan district, but it is truly more of a prison hospital than just a hospital. The word Anking means peace and health, more specifically for the mentally ill, and while not all Anking hospitals are like prisons, unfortunately this one kind of is. The Beijing Anking is under the control of the Public Security Bureau, and a man named Wang Wangxing has spoken out about his treatment there. Wang is a political activist who was arrested on June 4th, 1992 for unfurling a banner in Tiananmen Square on the 3rd anniversaries of the protests that happened there. After his arrest, he was quickly sent to the psychiatric hospital and suddenly diagnosed with political monomania. He spent 13 years trapped in this facility, and after his release, he details being forced to take the psychoactive drug chlorpromazine 3 times a day. He discussed having to share cells with mentally ill patients that had extensive violent records and who really frightened him, as well as the severe understaffing of the hospital, leaving 2 nurses in charge of 70 patients. There are reports of patients at the hospital passing away from abuse endured during their time there, from both nurses as well as other violent patients. Wang actually witnessed 2 deaths. One from a heart attack brought on by an electric acupuncture treatment, and the other was on a hunger strike and passed away while being force-fed by other inmates. Safe to say this place was absolutely terrifying to be held captive. In 1999, Wang was actually discharged on the condition that he didn't have any contact with the media. He asked if he would be allowed to have a press conference to discuss his confinement, and shortly after asking, he was removed from his home by 8 public service officers and forcibly placed back into the hospital. In 2005, he was finally released and unexpectedly deported to Germany. Upon examination by 2 separate doctors in 2006, neither doctor found any symptoms that he was suffering from any mental illness that would justify his forceful admission to the hospital.
Number 10, Ruyang Hotel. Often regarded as the ugliest building in the world, which I can agree with, the Ruyang Hotel is a 180-story structure in Pyongyang. The hotel was started in 1987 and stopped in 1993, and it seems unlikely that it will ever be finished as a functioning hotel. The building consists of 3,000 suites and 5 revolving restaurants, at least as it was planned. Currently, it sits at the heart of the city as a concrete shell, but its massive size, aka 1,082 feet, makes it difficult to ignore as it dominates the skyline. But if you ask anyone who lives in the city, they deny it exists, even though it's clearly there. Tourists traveling by taxi have found it impossible to use the hotel as a landmark because no one admits that the building is there. It's even airbrushed out of official photographs. And even if it ever is finished, who is supposed to stay there? Even ignoring the low wages of the average North Korean, there's no real tourism industry to speak of, so it's just strange. Number 9, the Arch of Reunification. The Arch of Reunification was erected in 2001 to commemorate Kim Il-sung's proposal of a reunited Korea. The arch stands above the Reunification Highway, which leads from Pyongyang to the demilitarized zone DMZ. The concrete arch features 2 Korean women dressed in traditional outfits holding up a sphere with a map of unified Korea on it. It's one of the more thoughtful gestures from the dictatorship, so thoughtful in fact that it almost makes you forget about those tunnels they dug leading into South Korea. Almost. Anyway, the arch is strange for two reasons. One, the highway it stands above is largely unused. Tourists in the capital city often remark how the highway has large lanes but little traffic. The use of so few cars is attributed to the poor financial standing of the average citizen, so bikes are a more common form of transportation. But the streets are so empty that tour guides will cut across lanes on either side to avoid the numerous potholes. There are also people that believe that the arches have a dual purpose. According to some, the arch was constructed with explosives inside, and I honestly wouldn't put it past them doing this. Number 8. Web cafes. North Korea doesn't really have internet access. Their websites, almost all of them government controlled, are as secluded as the country itself, and for many the only means of accessing them are through web cafes. North Korea is unable to host their own web pages, and as a result they rely instead on China, Japan, Germany, and even the United States for servers. As of 2007, Kwangmyeong only permitted access to a little over 30 different pages. They don't offer any connections to the outside world, and instead requests can be made for content. If accepted, Kwangmyeong downloads, censors, and re-uploads the content. However, Kwangmyeong remains unattainable for most people. 90% of North Koreans are completely unfamiliar with the internet. While it's theoretically possible to pick up a satellite connection from other Asian ISPs, smuggling the needed components into the country is next to impossible. For tourists, hotels in the city offer email services, however users aren't permitted to type their messages directly. Instead, they must be written and handed to an employee, and many tourists have noted that their messages are never received and probably are never sent, which is, wow. What a shocker. Number 7. Yongbyon Nuclear Facility. One of North Korea's most controversial sites is the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center. Yongbyon is North Korea's main nuclear facility. It houses the country's first nuclear reactors and produced the fuel used in the country's nuclear tests in 2006 and 2009. The center produced the fissile material for North Korea's 6 nuclear weapon tests from 2006 to 2017, and since 2009 is developing indigenous light water reactor nuclear power station technology. As of January 2019, the main facilities did not appear to be operating. However, in August 2021, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported North Korea appeared to have restarted the 5MW reactor, so that's fun. Number 6. Kim Jong-il's tomb. When North Korea's great leader Kim Il-sung suddenly died in 1994, the country was in a state of staged national mourning that had never been seen before on such a scale. Then when his successor, the great leader's son Kim Jong-il, the dear leader, suddenly died as well at the end of 2011, the scenes of public mourning even topped those in 1994. Now they lay to rest in the same building, but with everything in North Korea, you just can't go there and visit. One tourist got the chance and said, "You're at the mercy of your tour guides and what they've been told they can show you." When we went, Kim Jong-il was laying in state in his glass coffin. Somber music piped through hidden loudspeakers, not a word was spoken. Guards made sure the procedures were orderly and appropriate. We had to line up in 4s and bow 3 times at the great leader's feet and both sides but not the head, as this is regarded as disrespectful apparently. You also can't take photographs. Now, that description just sounds overall spooky, and I don't think I'd want to go there even if I could. Number 5. Hwasong Camp. The 212 square mile prison camp is believed to house 10,000 people, many of them political prisoners. Reportedly, no one has ever escaped. Prisoners are exploited for hard, dangerous, and deadly labor in mining, logging, and agriculture. According to Mr. Lee, a former security officer in Hwasong Camp, the inmates were overworked and they had very little time to rest. Prisoners had to work all day until they fulfilled their quotas and attend self-criticism meetings afterward. Often they were allowed to sleep only for 4 hours at night. Mr. Lee witnessed many fatal accidents in the workplace, and information is extremely limited as the camp has always been a maximum security camp under strict control and surveillance. An unidentified teenager reported how he was sent to the camp with his entire family at age 13. He witnessed his father being beaten cruelly and his mother and sisters being taken advantage of by security guards. Residents from nearby villages have heard about the horrific conditions inside the camp, but were never allowed to get near the camp. Number 4. Kijongdong. Kijongdong, better known as Propaganda Village, is a truly creepy place in North Korea. Built in the 1950s, Kijongdong is situated on North Korea's end of the DMZ and has a grand total of 200 people living in it. Well, that's if you believe the North Korean government. In reality, there are absolutely no residents. Zero. It's completely empty. The village was designed to show off the virtues of North Korean lifestyle to South Korean villages in view and to lead to defection. The brightly painted concrete buildings were much more lavish than rural villagers in either country could afford. Each building is wired for electricity with lights running on a timer. Skeleton crews appear at night to maintain the buildings and give the general appearance that someone might actually be living there. However, anyone with a set of binoculars can see that the buildings are empty, some completely lacking floors, ceilings, and even glass windows. Whether or not the village has led to defection is unknown, but it's hard to imagine anyone falling for the trick nearly 60 years later. Number 3. Kim Il-sung Stadium. Kim Il-sung Stadium is a multi-purpose stadium located in Pyongyang, the capital city of North Korea. It's the largest stadium in the world and can house 150,000 people. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a stadium be scary? Well, what it's used for is truly haunting. Rarely, if ever, are there any sports events held there, as the stadium is mostly used for propaganda and military parades. During these parades, there are many huge images shown in the stands, but it's actually just North Koreans holding up a piece of cardboard to create the image. They have to stand there holding up the cardboard for hours. It's also been alleged that traitors of the state have been taken into the stadium to be paraded around and have never been seen again. In particular, a group of generals disappeared in the stadium after an attempted coup attempt. And later on that day, smoke could be seen coming out of the stadium. Number 2. Room 39. Room 39 is an organization meant to get foreign currency for the leader through any means necessary. It was established by the nation's forefather Kim Il-sung in the late 1970s. The agents there would manufacture drugs, counterfeit notes, deal arms, and traffic humans to fund their leader's lavish lifestyle. They hired chemists to produce which are then smuggled to Japan, China, and across Asia. The mysterious organization is estimated to bring Kim Jong-un between $500 million and $1 billion per year, enabling him to buy political support and fund nuclear programs. With the revenue from Room 39, Kim never goes hungry. While his people starve to death, Kim enjoys dishes like foie gras, lobster, and caviar. Overall, this is just insane to me how they can get away with this. And coming in at number 1 is Camp 22. Camp 22 was a prison camp in North Korea that was reported to have been closed in 2012, but I'm not too sure I believe that. The camp was a maximum security area, completely isolated from the outside world. The camp was founded around 1965 and is surrounded by an inner 3,300 volt electric fence and an outer barbed wire fence with traps and hidden nails between the two fences. The camp was controlled by roughly 1,000 guards and 500 to 600 administrative agents. The guards were equipped with many weapons to make sure that the prisoners behaved. In the 1990s, there was an estimated 50,000 prisoners in the camp. Prisoners were mostly people who criticized the government, people deemed politically unreliable, or purged senior party members. Based on the guilt by association principle, they are often imprisoned together with their whole family, including children and the elderly, and including any children born in the camp. All prisoners were detained until they died. They were never released. A former guard described the conditions in the camp as harsh and life-threatening. He likened the prisoners to walking skeletons, dwarfs, and cripples in rags. He estimated that about 30% of the prisoners had deformities, such as torn-off ears, smashed eyes, crooked noses, and faces covered with cuts and scars resulting from beatings and other mistreatment. Around 2,000 prisoners, he said, had missing limbs, but even prisoners who needed crutches to walk were still forced to work. Prisoners had to do hard physical labor in agriculture, mining, and inside factories from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., followed by ideological re-education and self-criticism sessions. Almost 30,000 people reportedly died of starvation at this camp in 2012. This is literally so disgusting, and it makes me so upset that humans could treat other people that way.
Ugh. Starting off at number 10 is the Old Washoe Club. What was once a high-class bar reserved for the wealthiest men in Virginia City, Nevada, is now one of the most haunted places in the state. You see, as the riches dwindled, so did the clientele that began to roam around, and soon enough, anyone with cash for a beer was welcome inside the saloon. And it didn't take long before the bar became a frequent hotspot visited by Johns looking for a cheap night of fun away from their wives. However, along with the new nightlife, the new patrons also brought lots of violence, with bar fights becoming a near nightly incident. The next thing you know, bar fights turned into fights with the working ladies. These women were being killed by the patrons if they wouldn't give them what they wanted. Today, the building is mostly used for commercial properties, but many ghosts have been reported haunting the once wealthy halls, especially the ghost of Lena. Legend has it that Lena was once one of the girls working in the bedrooms back in the day, and tragically she was killed by one of the Johns on the 3rd floor. But she's not the only ghost who roams the halls, as allegedly the man who killed Lena felt such guilt over what he did that he took his own life the very next day on the 2nd floor. To this day, his ghost is seen walking around looking for Lena and sometimes even crying out her name. Next up at number 9, the Clown Motel. There are a few things that rival my fear of dolls, but if there is one thing that comes close, it would probably be clowns. So a motel that's entire theme and brand is that it's filled head to toe with clowns actually sounds like my nightmare. I mean, how do people sleep in a room where creepy clown paintings and figurines stare at them in the dark? I will never understand. But to make matters even worse, it's not just filled with freaky and terrifying clowns. I mean, truly that would be enough for me, but this place doubles down as a haunted motel as well. Long before the clown-filled motel opened its doors, this corner of town was reserved for the local graveyard. Being the Wild West and all, between the mining incidents and just general dangerous lifestyles, in about 10 years the cemetery was filled to capacity with 300 corpses. And it seems the spirits of these lost souls like to roam around the nearby hotel, terrifying guests as if clowns weren't getting the job done already. Patrons of the motel today frequently report seeing strange occurrences around the motel, such as hearing strange voices or doors slamming shut seemingly out of nowhere. So unless you are a clown-loving ghost enthusiast with a glutton for punishment, then I would suggest looking for a different place to stay on your visit. Coming in at number 8, the Pioneer Saloon. Opened in 1913, the Pioneer Saloon is the oldest bar in southern Nevada, and oh boy does it have a history. In its heyday, the saloon was no stranger to a bar fight, and as a result there are quite a few bullet holes lining the walls. But that is not the worst of it. It's said American actor Clark Gable frequented this establishment and was here waiting for Carole Lombard the night that a search party went out looking for her after a nearby plane crash. But the most tragic story is that of the bartender, who's said to have taken his own life right before a full house of patrons. As a result, many have said that the Pioneer Saloon is home to a whole mess of spirits. Of course, most famously the bartender, but also an entity referred to as Ruby, and even the ghost of Carole Lombard herself. Over the years, many paranormal investigators have popped in hoping to snag a recording of a strange noise or catch an unusual sighting on video, and believe it or not, they all claim to have been successful. But it's not just the experts. Patrons of the bar too claim to see doors slam shut or hear gunshots at night. But nothing is as scary as the apparition of the lonely bartender, who's said to terrify even the most skeptical guests who visit. Coming in at number 7, Yellow Jacket Mine. Widely believed to be the most haunted place across Nevada, this terrifying mine got its claim to fame over 150 years ago. Back in 1869, during the early hours of the morning, a huge fire broke out inside the mine, spreading up to the 800-foot level. Completely unaware, the day crew began their workday descending into the mine, and soon burning timbers started collapsing around them, trapping them inside. Despite firefighters arriving on the scene, the water pressure wasn't strong enough to extinguish the fire, and so the
blaze continued for the next 3 weeks. Tragically, 39 miners lost their lives inside, but the strange thing is that only 34 bodies were ever recovered. Many over the years have wondered where the remains of the missing miners have gone, but one thing is for sure, all the men's spirits have stayed behind to haunt any who step foot on the property. Today, while you can't enter the mine itself, those that visit the area have reported seeing blue and white orbs floating around the main entrance. But most frightening of all are the screams and cries that can be heard echoing from the tunnels below. Coming in at number 6, Zak Bagans' Haunted Museum. It may be a popular tourist attraction for Las Vegas visitors, but that doesn't mean it's not also a terrifyingly haunted museum. If you don't already know, Zak Bagans was once one of America's most famous TV ghost hunters and spent years collecting some of the most creepy, evil, and possessed trinkets this world has to offer. So what's an ex-ghost hunter to do with all his haunted memorabilia? Why, make a haunted museum, of course. If you dare visit the museum today, you'll find the items encased in glass and behind velvet ropes to keep you from touching them. But that doesn't stop the frightening spirits that haunt them from freaking out the patrons anyways. Inside the museum are 30 rooms, each filled with cursed items and riddled with haunted spirits, such as haunted dolls, a cursed rocking chair that is believed to be the inspiration behind the actual haunting in the movie The Conjuring, and the original die-book box. The die-book box, for those that are not aware, is believed to be the most haunted object on the planet. The die-book originates from Jewish folklore and is an evil entity that will possess the living and never leave. And as the legend goes, you are never to open the die-book box, otherwise the entity will escape and wreak havoc on anyone in its path. Coming in at number 5, the Hoover Dam. This popular tourist destination spanning the Colorado River between Arizona and Nevada is revered as a spectacular feat of engineering. The construction on this behemoth began back in 1931 and it took 5 years to complete. But make no mistake, the history of this dam is not a squeaky clean slate. In fact, it's said that a whopping 112 people died during its construction, and that each and every one of them haunts the dam to this day. And if that wasn't dark enough, rumor has it that some of the workers who fell to their deaths were actually permanently encased in the dam's concrete. While the concrete may encase their physical bodies, their spirits are said to roam the grounds, terrifying anyone who they come into contact with. Many believe the spirits are angry to have lost their lives to the project and are there to take revenge on those who reap the benefits they never got to. Visitors and staff alike have reported cold spots, flickering electricity, equipment malfunctions, and finding missing items turn up in completely inexplicable places as soon as they are on the property. So just be careful if you ever decide to stop on by, you never know what could happen. Next up at number 4, the Overland Hotel and Saloon. Back in the day, the county of Pioche was a near lawless pit filled with danger and bloodshed. Over the years, it's said 72 souls were laid to rest across the county, and it's believed they all remain haunting the grounds to this day. Nicknamed Nevada's liveliest go town, Pioche might have a tamer facade during the day, but at night it's just as wild as it was back in the day. But the most terrifying spot of them all is said to be the Overland Hotel and Saloon. Although the Overland that stands today was rebuilt after a tragic fire in 1948, the spirits that haunt the grounds were not deterred. In fact, some say they even came back with a vengeance. So much so that a few years back, a crew for the TV show Ghost Adventures decided to try their hand and check out the rumors for themselves, and as they tell it, they recorded some of the most successful interactions with spirits at this hotel than anywhere else to date. To be clear, successful for a paranormal investigator pretty much translates to a thing of nightmares for anyone else. To top it off, guests continuously report witnessing shadowy figures lurking in the corners and slamming doors, and some guests even say they've been physically shaken by spirits until they awake. In fact, this place is so haunted that staff say you need to tell them if you want to avoid ghosts, as there are only a few select rooms that the spirits tend to stay away from. That being said, you are never truly safe from their presence. Coming in at number 3, the Silver Queen Hotel. Built back in 1876, the Silver Queen is just about the oldest hotel in the state, and not much has changed since the days it opened its doors. Beautifully restored to maintain its 19th century authenticity, it's not just the brass hardware that has stayed since the early days, but some of the patrons too. The most famous of which is the ghost of Rosie, believed to be the spirit of a woman of the night who was a frequent and favorite patron of the Silver Queen Hotel in its heyday, but who tragically took her own life in the very hotel she worked in. As the story goes, a few of her clients became violent towards her, and Rosie, depressed and seeing no way out of this life, decided to end it herself in her bathtub of room 11. To this day, it's said room 11 is haunted by her ghost, and those that have stayed there say they routinely hear rattling doorknobs, phantom footsteps, and disembodied voices echo throughout. But she isn't alone. Other frightening ghosts have also made their appearance in the wedding chapel's night cameras, and visitors swear to hear footsteps that sound like clacking along a wooden floor, despite that the hallways are carpeted. I mean, it's just creepy from top to bottom. Next up in our number 2 spot, the Goldfield Hotel. Although it now stands abandoned and boarded up, back in 1908 it was one of the hottest hotels in town, and it certainly has a spicy legend. As the story goes, back in the day there was a young woman named Elizabeth who caught the eye of owner George Wingfield. George became quite smitten with the lady and frequently swung by her room for a nighttime visit. However, Elizabeth soon fell pregnant, and George, concerned for his reputation and business, lured her into room 109 at the hotel under false pretenses. Once inside, he chained Elizabeth to the radiator and forced her to stay in the room alone until she gave birth. But tragically, Elizabeth died in the room, and so George took it upon himself to deal with her. Situation, allegedly throwing it down a nearby mine shaft. Those who pass by the old hotel today say they can hear the sound of chains clanking against the radiator, and that Elizabeth can be seen walking around room 109 wearing a long white dress and weeping. Some even say they've heard her cries echo in the streets. But it's not just the weeping Elizabeth that haunts these evil halls, but the spirit of a former employee who took their life, as well as George himself. It's believed George remains there, tormenting the poor Elizabeth even in her death, making this place more and more evil as the hours go by. And last up in our number 1 spot is Circus Circus. Since its opening in 1968, Circus Circus has become one of the most famous hotel and casinos in Las Vegas. Over the years, it has of course been the meeting place of countless guests, but it has also been the location of a multitude of crimes, including multiple brutal killings. Most notorious is the tragic case of a mother and son who were found dead in room 123 in what appeared to be a brutal case of the mother taking his life and then her own. No one knows what led the mother to do such a thing, but it's said the pair frequently wander the hotel, and at night the loud screams are often heard echoing throughout the hall. Most terrifying though are the reports of people who have stayed in the room, as apparently the words "Help me" have appeared on numerous occasions scrawled across the bathroom mirror. But it wasn't just brutal killings among family members that went down in these hallowed halls. Believe it or not, there was also apparently a deep affiliation with the American mobster Anthony John Spilotro, who was put in charge of the gift shop to cover for his illegal business dealings. As you can imagine, with mobsters frequenting the establishment, there was quite a lot of bloodshed going on in the shadows, and so many of the other ghosts are suspected to have been the victims of Spilotro and his men. However, some even believe Spilotro himself, who was brutally killed by his employer, haunts the halls hoping to get revenge on the very people who put him in the grave all those years ago.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Cave of Fairies. Located in Hubei, China, there is this man-made cave known as the Cave of Fairies. So you would think that it's something magical and beautiful, right? Well, when people looked inside, they found something way more dark and grim. Hanging from the cave 50 meters up were decaying coffins. Some coffins were hanging from wooden stakes. Others were wedged into the openings of the cave walls. The coffins were said to be around 1200 years old. Each one was carved out of a single tree trunk and weighed around 220 pounds. It said that this was done as part of a religious ritual. It said that by doing this, it would bless the dead, but also it would keep animals from eating their bodies, so kind of a win-win. But some of the coffins were torn open. Researchers believe that in the 1960s, someone entered the cave and tore open the coffins for the wood to make a fire. This person's fate remains unknown. In our 9th spot, we have the fraudulent drugs. In 2016, the Chinese government did an investigation on pharmaceutical drugs, and what they found was quite disturbing. Over 80% of the data on these drugs were fraudulent. Some drugs had their records of side effects deleted. Others were placebo pills, so they didn't actually work. Other information was incomplete or missing, and other products were just mixes of existing medicines. In fact, research has shown that since 2001, more than 200,000 Chinese patients have died from the use of fake pharmaceuticals. It's very dangerous, and the corruption went deep. But a reason why there are so many fake or misleading drugs on the market in China is because of the pressure they feel to produce groundbreaking work. If they don't, they feel like they're gonna be fired. Moving on to number 8, we have the village of Hemen-Menga. In 2015, archaeologists were exploring this prehistoric village when they found the remains of 97 human bodies stuffed into a small house. The bodies were people of all ages, said to have been killed by some prehistoric disaster. They think maybe it was like an epidemic. So the dead were all packed into this house and then it was burnt down. So when they found the bones, they were all charred and deformed and stuck together in one big heap. Very dark and disturbing. In our 7th spot, we have the organ transplants. So every country has its struggle with trying to find a donor for an organ transplant. It's typical to have more people in need than donors available. Most people wait years until they find a donor. Well, in China, some people only need to wait weeks. In 2016, around 640 organs were transplanted. Now you might be like, wow, that's amazing. Well, take this in. It was 640 operations that occurred over a period of 10 days. How did they manage that? On top of that, there were only 30 donors. Well, it turns out that over 21 body parts were harvested per person. Some were taken from prisoners without their permission. One doctor claimed that he was ordered to remove organs from a prisoner who had been shot but was still alive. The operation was performed while he was struggling. That is freaking scary and disturbing. In our 6th spot, we have the brain monitoring devices. In 2018, it was revealed that major companies were using brain monitoring devices to monitor the brainwave activities of their workers. Now, why were they doing this, you ask? Well, it's said that it will improve the workers' productivity. Plus, they are using the headsets to find emotional workers, because in their eyes, emotional workers are unstable and won't be productive workers and are unpredictable. And lastly, some jobs require high concentration, so this device can detect who is suitable for those jobs and who is not. I don't know, man, the idea of my brain activity being recorded every day is not something I'm down for. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the pit full of heads. Just recently, archaeologists working at the Great Wall of China found a number of interesting items. They found lots of valuable items like jade objects and weapons, but then they found something pretty disturbing. They found a pit full of severed heads. That's right. They found about 80 heads in 6 pits under the city walls. It's believed that they were all victims of sacrifices during the city's founding ceremony, and all of them were young women. In fact, an analysis of the bones showed that they were not from the area, so they were kidnapped, taken as captives, and then sacrificed. In our 4th spot, we have death by 1,000 cuts, aka Ling Chi. This was a very disturbing form of torture from medieval China, and as you can imagine, it's literally death by 1,000 cuts. So the victim would be tied to a wood frame and then their flesh was slowly cut off from the body. The aim was to cause as much pain as possible while still keeping the victim alive. And believe it or not, they stopped using this method of torture around 1905. A famous story involving it would be the execution of Wang Wequin in 1904. He was sentenced to death by lynchy in a vegetable market. You know, just so you have some light entertainment while you grocery shop. Needless to say, researchers were shook when they found about lynchy. In our third spot, we have the Lady of Dye mummy. You might need your mummy when you see this mummy, get it? Cause this is the creepiest thing that you're about to see today, hands down. The Lady of Dye, or the Diva mummy, is a 2100-year-old mummy that is the best preserved ancient human ever found. She was found in 1971 inside of a tomb with perfectly preserved artifacts. Turns out that this woman died between 178 and 145 BC, but her skin was still moist and elastic, and her joints were still flexible, not stiff at all. In fact, she still had eyelashes and hair in her nostrils and blood in her veins. Keep in mind, she was over 1,000 years old, so that's hella old. But I will say that when they removed her out of the cave, the oxygen immediately took a toll on her body, so the photos that we see today don't do it justice. Literally, when researchers found her, they thought that she had died that year. That's because she was preserved in an airtight tomb 12 meters underground. She was locked inside 4 layers of coffins. 4 layers? That's insane. Either she was a woman of great importance, so they wanted to keep her safe, or they locked her up so she could never get out. Moving on to number 2, we have the Breed Ready database. Ready to get creeped out? I don't think you are. So in 2019, a Dutch researcher discovered a database in China open to the public. This database held the private information of 1.8 million Chinese women. Not only did it give everyone access to their phone numbers and their addresses, and like, I know what you're thinking, that's hella sketchy, I know, but it also gave each person a breed ready status, meaning it would tell anyone on the database if the women were of suitable age to bear children or whether they already had children. It also kept track of the women's education levels and political status. The scariest part, no one knows who's behind it. Theory goes that it's the government keeping track of everyone, but like, why would they have it open to the public? That's a violation of privacy. And if it's not the government behind this, then who the heck got access to all this private information? And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Hidden Monk. Back in 1996, a statue of a Buddha was sent to the Netherlands from China to be restored. While restoring it, they did a CT scan, and it was revealed that there was a human skeleton chilling inside of it. Turns out that these were the remains of a 1,000-year-old mummified monk. They also found that the monk was sitting on a bundle of cloth covered in inscriptions. The inscriptions revealed that the body belonged to a Buddhist monk named Li Quan, and he practiced self-mummification. This was a lengthy process in which an individual would meditate, starve, dehydrate, and poison themselves. It goes as so. So for the first 1,000 days, the monks would only eat nuts, seeds, fruits, and berries. Then they would put themselves through intense labor so that they would lose all their body fat. Then for the next 1,000 days, they would only eat barks and roots. Then they would drink poisonous tea, which would make them vomit and lose their bodily fluids. It was also done to kill off maggots and bacteria that would cause the body to decay after death. Then in the final stage, the monk would lock themselves in a stone tomb and just meditate until they died. That is hella intense. Keep in mind, this process took more than 6 years. Number 10. The Bisman Building. The Bisman Building was built in 1886, and fun fact, the film Shawshank Redemption used this place as a filming location. If you have seen the film, the building is used as the entrance to the Brewer Hotel, where Brooks and Red stayed after they were paroled from Shawshank. The real building, though, is haunted. While here many people experience a feeling of dread and sadness, particularly on the 3rd floor. Many people also report an overwhelming sensation of darkness when on this floor, so if I were you, I would just stay away from the 3rd floor in general. Disembodied footsteps, voices, being poked and pushed, black shadows, and dark figures caught in images seems to be something that happens a lot. Spirits of a young girl Ruthie, her aunt, and the spirit of a retired worker who died in an accident before leaving the building are 3 identified spirits that stay here. In past investigations here, investigators investigators have received audible responses to their questions. Yep, the ghosts spoke to them. One piece of audio evidence was when an investigator asked if they could speak to Ruthie, and a voice was caught saying, "Is Ruthie here?" In addition to Ruthie, people have witnessed the spirit of a woman throughout the upper floors, people in Victorian clothing, and the sounds of people working. Number 9. Staley Road. Sometime in the early 1800s, pioneer John Wrench used the services of 3 Staley brothers to build a flour mill. The finished structure was to become the first double-wheeled mill in Ohio. The business flourished, and after several years, John had made enough money to retire and ended up selling his mill to Elias Staley. The mill was then passed down to his brother Andrew and continued to produce flour until 1905. Today, the mill is still standing, and on Staley Road, named for the brothers, winds its way past and through the woods. It has become something of a rite of passage for local teens to drive this road at night to show how brave they are. It's been said that Old Man Staley went on a rampage, ending the lives of many, and is now haunting the road. Motorists say that they often experience unexplained car trouble, and some have even seen Staley's ghost standing next to or even lying in the road. Number 8. The Golden Lamb. As the oldest hotel in Ohio, the Golden Lamb has seen more than its share of famous guests, including Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, Daniel Webster, and 12 American presidents. Yeah. 12. It's fantastic, but there's also been death and tragedy in the hotel. Guests have cited a girl who may be Sarah Stubbs, the niece of the hotel manager in the 1800s, or possibly Eliza Clay, a girl who died of a high fever at the hotel in 1825. The ghost of Charles R. Sherman, an Ohio Supreme Court justice who died at the inn in 1929, is said to appear in the hallways as a gray, gaunt man and conjures the smell of cigar smoke. Charles's death left his wife and 11 children, including Civil War General William T. Sherman, penniless. As a result, most of his children were put up for adoption, and some say the guilt of his family's demise keeps his spirit at the inn. Number 7. Moonville Tunnel. Located deep in the woods, the tunnel is framed by a faded stone archway covered in moss. The tunnel itself is long and extremely dark. It's actually an out-of-work stretch of railroad track that leads to an old coal mining town. If you're brave enough to venture through it, you might see the ghost of Frank Lawhead, an unlucky train conductor who met his end in a head-on collision with another train. Visitors in the area have taken photos with cameras or phones, only to look back at them later and notice the pale figure of a man they didn't see before, or phantom train lights blazing at the end of the tunnel. It's also said if you listen carefully, inhale deeply, and blink intermittently, you may encounter spirits from another time. The piercing whistle of a train rounding a curve, the smell of lavender wafting from a woman in an old-fashioned dress, or even the glow of gaslit lantern illuminating the face of the weathered brakeman. So that's fun. Number 6. The Buxton Inn. The Buxton Inn was built by Orrin Granger in 1812 as an inn and tavern, and it also served as Granville's first post office and as a stagecoach stop. I'm just gonna say it, this place is haunted. The first ghost spotted in the Buxton Inn was the first owner, Orrin. Other ghosts include the Lady in Blue, rumored to be the former innkeeper Ethel Bonnie Bonnell, Major Buxton, whom the inn was named, and even a phantom cat seen slinking along the halls. There's been strange activity like footsteps and doors opening on their own reported in the inn's basement, where stagecoach drivers would often stay during their stopovers in the past. However, the ghosts just don't stay in the basement. Oh no. Rooms 7 and 9 are said to be the strongest places for activity, with apparitions appearing. One guest even reported a ghost cat showing up to cuddle and purr in the middle of the night, which, like, aw, that's so cute. Guests have reported strange phenomenon throughout the hotel though, like their names being called out and invisible footsteps. I would not want to sleep there. Number 5. Woods surrounding London. Okay, again, not London, England, but London, Ohio. Deep inside these woods sits an old abandoned barn that is so rotted away it is practically melded back into the trees. It's rumored that ghosts like to spend some time here. If you ask anyone from the area, they'll tell you that these woods are haunted. According to legend, a family of 5 was traveling through the woods in the late 1890s when they were stopped and had their lives ended by a band of thieves. Those brave enough to wander through the woods of London at night have reported hearing gunshots and disembodied screaming. Others have felt a sudden drop in temperature before seeing a strange white mist hanging in the trees. Let me just say, it's a no from me. Number 4. Ridge's Asylum. Ridge's Asylum originally opened in 1874 and was known as the Athens Asylum for the Insane. It had 2 wings, one for female patients and one for the male patients. The most violent patients were housed at the outermost tip of each wing. By the start of the 1900s, the asylum had become dangerously overcrowded, and rumors of inhumane treatment at the hands of the overworked staff were growing. Despite this, it was not officially closed until 1993. Some parts of the building are still in use, while other areas are completely abandoned. One of the scariest places in the building is the outline of a body where Margaret Schrilling died in 1979. She apparently got lost in the disused part of the hospital in the winter of 1978-79 and was not found for more than a month. When the corpse was eventually removed, it left a stain that could never be washed away, which just makes me gag thinking about it, but imagine the smell, like, ew. Ugh. She is one of the many ghosts who is said to walk the asylum at night. Strange figures have been seen roaming around the old floors. Others have heard disembodied voices, footsteps, and screaming. Most appealing to imagination is the basement. Some claim severely disabled patients were kept on chains in dungeon-like places. Some say they've even heard the chains being pulled. Oh, and there's also a cemetery on the grounds which holds over 1,930 bodies. Of those, 700 women and 959 men lay under the headstones marked with only a number, which is sad. Number 3. Bobby Mackey's. Built in 1850, Bobby Mackey's is said to be the most haunted nightclub in America. When it was first built, the building served as a slaughterhouse and meat packing facility. The standard for most slaughterhouses of its day, the facility featured a well to collect the runoff of animal blood, innards, and other waste. If that image wasn't icky enough, there have also been several deaths in and around the club throughout the years. The place harbors energy so dark that a portal to hell is rumored to swirl somewhere within its basement. There is strange, suffocating heat, a trash can once flew through the air, and the apparition of a man with a handlebar mustache appears in the mirror. I would not want to get anywhere near that place ever. Number 2. Licking County Jail. Originally opened in 1889, the Licking County Jail is now home to only prisoners serving afterlife sentences. It contains stacks of cramped, grimy cells lining its dimly lit halls. Since being put out of commission, the jail has become a notoriously haunted hotspot. While it was operating, a total of 3 sheriffs and 19 inmates died on the premise. If you make your way to Licking County Jail, it's said you should peer between the cell bars as figures of prisoners are said to peer back. Visitors have reported hearing cell doors slamming, being touched, whispering in your ear, whistles, the sound of footsteps, some of those being what seems residual, the jingling of keys, screams, and moaning, as well as seeing strange light anomalies, full shadow figures, and photos with unexpected images in them. That sounds absolutely terrifying, and I would not want to go there. And coming in at number 1 is Sedamsville Rectory. The Sedamsville Rectory is a historical building that once served as the home for priests of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church. Priests of questionable moral character were rumored to live here, if you know what I mean, including a man who was moved around considerably before retiring from the priesthood, leaving some to believe the church was covering up his tendency of mistreating animals. His fellow priests later confessed to hearing strange sounds coming from his bedroom and feeling uneasy in his presence. As the alleged site of the mistreatment, it's no shock that the place has some wicked demonic energy. Reports detail strange howling cries and deep scratches appearing in the flesh of workers. The current owner of the building, Terry Scott, even claimed that she was pushed by an invisible force. The presence was so evil that a priest was called in to perform an exorcism, but his efforts did little to keep the demonic energy at bay, and whatever monster lurked in there still remains, and I would not want to mess with it.
So starting off this countdown, we have Ordos Kingbashi, and I apologize, I know I'm going to butcher every single name on this list. Please give me a break, okay? I suck at pronunciations, especially cities that I've never been to. So this is the most famous ghost city in China and the world's largest ghost town. Located in Inner Mongolia, Ordos Kingbashi was meant to be a modern city with a new style of architecture. There's tons of unique looking buildings, large stadiums, theaters, and big public spaces. It was actually called the Dubai of China. Just one problem.
It lacks people. The city was built for 300,000 people, but only 70,000 ended up moving to live there. Then, after running out of funding, construction on the city just stopped. Nowadays, there are tons of unfinished and empty apartments. Now it's called a modern ghost town, a stillborn city, and a failed utopia. If you travel the area, it is beautiful with its buildings, but the silence and the emptiness is very frightening. Not only that, but beneath the streets is a whole underground parking system, which will give you nightmares. It looks like a giant underground doomsday bunker. Moving on to number 9, we have Tianducheng. The Tianducheng is known for being a copycat of Paris. Seriously, it was designed to look like as if you are in Paris. The streets look just like the ones in France, and they have a replica of the Medici fountain. To top it all off, they even have their very own Eiffel Tower. But sadly, it wasn't as successful as they hoped, and now many of the buildings remain deserted. Now people think of it as a creepy version of France. Many visitors feel uneasy walking down the streets. The once beautiful city now has stores with cracked and worn paint, and has a bunch of creepy statues with eyes that look like they follow your every move. In fact, some stores are nothing more than walls that they painted to look like stores and storefronts with like windows with merchandise in the windows. Kinda weird, kinda creepy. In our 8th spot, we have Chang'an. On May 20th, 2011, the construction of the city of Chang'an in Yunnan was approved. 100,000 new apartments were built, but they have no occupants. You have enormous office buildings with no workers, big streets with no cars. Now it's considered one of the largest ghost towns in Asia. What's creepy is that sections of the city remain uncompleted. There are dirt roads all trashed with rubble. It literally looks like an apocalyptic area. It's very creepy, especially when it's dead silent and all you can hear is the wind whistling through the abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 7, we have the Guangdong province. The Guangdong province is home to tons of abandoned villages, but the one I want to talk about is the village of Dakito. This village is known to have a ghostly presence, and it's said to be haunted, but there's hardly any information out there on it. So I don't know what exactly happened there or why it's abandoned, but all I know is that something sinister haunts the land. Coming in at number 6, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance, but more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there are no citizens working inside the tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as the following: "There's just nobody there. It's like having a good-for-nothing child." His words, not mine. He says at night, the area is 10 times creepier, with brightly lit roads, but no one driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards him, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? I have no idea, but he's terrified of the area and thinks it's haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Dandong New District. The new district of Dandong features a giant shopping mall, huge government offices, a basketball stadium, and 60+ apartment towers. There's even a huge Ferris wheel. It seems like a really impressive city until you actually go there and find that it's all just for show. The Ferris wheel doesn't even work, and no one lives there. So this city is actually part of a border zone between North Korea. The Globe and Mail states, and I quote, "Part of the lure of the Dandong New District was supposed to be its proximity to Sinuiju, the North Korean city on the opposite bank of the narrow Yalu River. But since it's so close, citizens were worried that they would be exposed to possible radiation from North Korea's nuclear tests. So now, no one really wants to live there." Making our way down the list, number 4, we have Nanhui New City. Nanhui New City, formerly named Lingang New City, is located 60 kilometers southeast of downtown Shanghai. The city was said to become a mini Hong Kong, but as we know, that didn't happen. The construction of the city began in 2003 and was said to be done by 2020, but it's nowhere near completion, and some believe that it will never be completed. In fact, 8 university campuses were built, and it could house more than 800,000 people, but now it remains abandoned. In fact, it's said that in order to build the city, one homeless man's shelter was destroyed in the process, and with nowhere to go, he committed suicide. People believe that he now will haunt the area and whoever decides to live live there. In our third spot, we have Cafe Dien. Construction of the city began in the early 2000s. It was planned to be the solution to Beijing's pollution problem. It was going to be an eco-city, but the project was abandoned due to lack of government support and funding issues. It was built to hold millions of people, but only a few thousand live there. You got locked up abandoned hotels and unfinished buildings. One woman said, and I quote, "I was very sad when I saw how underdeveloped it was. I went back crying all the way." But due to the city's high amount of abandoned buildings, it attracts a lot of urban explorers. But sadly, a group of explorers died after a structural collapse in one of the buildings they were exploring. In our second spot, we have Lanzhou New Area. Built in a sandy plateau area, some parts of the city literally look like you're in a desert. So when you first enter the city, you'll see a huge sign that says, "Welcome to the Oasis City." But it looks nothing like an oasis. The welcome sign looks like it leads to nothing. It looks very barren. But in some areas of the city, you will notice that there are replicas of the Parthenon and the Great Sphinx of Giza. And that's pretty cool, but they're still under construction. So in order to create this city, hundreds of sandy hills were bulldozed down, and some mountains were even cut down. There are some buildings, but it mainly looks like a huge sandstorm just took place and then engulfed most of the buildings. Now, some people do live there, but it's still considered a ghost city as it houses far less than anticipated. Legend goes that the ancient Egyptian god Khafre is cursing this area for having a replica of his Sphinx. Most researchers believe that the Sphinx was meant to act as a guardian for the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid is located beside it. So now, Khafre is mad and has made sure that the construction will never be completed and that it will never be a successful city. And in our number one spot, we have Miexi Lake City. I know for sure I pronounced that name wrong. The construction of the city began in 2007 and it was meant to be a highly sustainable city. The whole thing was designed to be eco-friendly and low carbon dependent. The project was described as this, and I quote, "Water is the primary element of design and acts as the heart and center of the master plan." They were going to have a huge lake that was going to be the main source of transportation. So people were going to be boating around, which was said to reduce pollution. And not only that, there were going to be canals that connected you to around the city. They expected a population of 206,000 people living there, but it was never really completed and is now an abandoned project. I mean, it was a pretty cool idea, but I don't know how many people are going to just love boating around instead of driving. Now, the city looks pretty beautiful and not creepy at all. Then again, rumor has it that the lake it was built near has been the site of multiple drownings. But of course, the government thought that was going to be bad news for their city, so they did whatever they could to try and hide the past.
Fuguan Huiguan Opera House creeps into number 10. This building was initially intended to house the thousands of people who had lost their homes, and this is during World War II. However, this building was constructed on an ancient graveyard, so it is said that these angry spirits are haunting the building. Today, this building has been converted into an opera house, and several tourists have claimed that they hear a screaming voice coming from a graveyard when no one is even there. Well, the yelling is obviously coming from down under. And legend says that if you throw a stone in the graveyard, an angry spirit will scold you forever. I don't think I'm gonna be brave enough to even try it. There's absolutely no way. Burma Inn stabs its way into number 9. A guest was staying at this hotel when he was poisoned years ago by the head chef. The chef was so overwhelmed by guilt, so he stabbed himself to death that same night. Legend has it that the ghost of the murdered man now haunts the hotel, constantly looking for the head chef so that he can get some revenge. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't ever want to become the head chef. High Street Community Center, Hong Kong takes the number 4 spot. This building used to be occupied by Japanese soldiers who were executed and tortured thousands of disobedient Hong Kongers. Later on, this place was converted into a mental asylum, but it has been abandoned since the 1960s.
And that's the second floor. People say that sometimes at night you can hear screaming from up there. Sometimes there'll be a demonstrated figure swinging through flames up there. And so sometimes at night, screaming can be heard from here. So you don't need to go to up on that floor. Ghosts running across there. I mean inside the corridor.
Well, rumors have it that you can still hear the screams through the halls, and a creepy figure roams the building, and if you make eye contact with it, the figure will burst into flames. The Great Wall of China tops this list in at number 1. This is regarded as one of the world's greatest wonders. It is known for its 5,000-mile long extension and stunning views, but during the construction, an estimated 1 million soldiers died while building the wall. Now, visitors have claimed that they have seen the ghosts of the soldiers walking around the wall, or they have reported that they have even heard marching steps. The north part of the wall is where the most ghost activity is reported. Lots of hikers have died around this area from very strange and unexplainable accidents.
Number 10. Malabar Farm. Malabar Farm was built in 1939 by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Louis Bromfield and was his home until his death in 1956. But before it was built, another family lived there in the 19th century. Celie Rose, a challenged young woman who lived there with her family, developed a romantic fixation on a neighborhood boy. When Celie's family told her to stop claiming the boy as her fiancé, she mixed rat poison in their porridge. Her father and brother died, but her mother survived. At her trial, Celie couldn't understand why her parents didn't come to see her. After all, she said, the rats always came back after her daddy fed them rat poison in the barn. Afterwards, she went on and lived with her mother, whom, yes, she tried to kill, but then Celie poisoned her again, and this time it worked. At age 23, Celie stood trial truly alone, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. She lived out the rest of her life in an insane asylum, and since then the house has been haunted. One visitor saw a woman dressed like Celie Rose outside the house. People have seen lights flicker, felt a phantom cat, disembodied voices are heard, and there's an overall eerie feeling on the property. Yeah. No kidding. Number 9. Beaver Creek State Park. Although this park is beautiful during the day, it has a darker side at night. A portion of the park was once part of a canal system from the early 1800s. There are 2 locks that are said to be haunted. Jake's Lock is said to be named after a former canal worker who was struck by lightning while walking across the top of the lock. He died instantly, but some claim that on certain nights, especially stormy ones, Jake returns with his ghostly lantern to continue his evening's work. Spooky. Nearby, Gretchen's Lock is said to be haunted by the ghost of a canal worker's daughter. Legend has it her father put her coffin inside the lock until he could load her body onto a ship headed for their homeland. But when the coffin was loaded onto a ship bound for home, the ship was lost at sea and didn't make it. Gretchen, pleading to rejoin her mother, reportedly makes an appearance at the lock every year on the anniversary of her death, which is just very sad. Number 8. The Wandle House. The Wandle House was constructed in 1916 by the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway with funds contributed by railroaders. The Brewster Railroad YMCA featured 62 dormitory rooms used by the railroad workers, a restaurant, movie theater, and bowling alley. Today, the building is home to the Historical Society and houses memorabilia from baseball team photos, class pictures from Beach City and Brewster schools, railroad memorabilia and equipment, payroll records, and military uniforms. It's filled with tons of history, so those from the past like to visit. While there, you might come across Teresa, who worked in the eatery around the 1940s and 50s. People have also reported hearing noises, seen doorknobs turning on their own, and dark figures. And even one time, someone who was doing work in the basement of the building watched a person walk through a wall. Let me just say, I've seen a ghost walk through a wall before too, and it's creepy, so it's not something I'd like to see again. Number 7. Crybaby Bridge. Locals say if you stand on the Alliance Area Bridge at night, the sound of crying can be heard. Some say that mothers who did not want their sons or daughters during the baby boom would toss them from the bridge into the river below in the dark of the night. Others believe the cries stem from members of a cult kidnapping locals and ending their lives as part of their secret ritual. And finally, some say ghostly cries stem from a distraught mother who lost it after her daughter would not stop crying. In desperation, she tossed her over the bridge to her death, and upon realizing what she had done, the woman reportedly drove off the bridge her own life. This is all around sad and creepy, but if I heard crying noises without anyone around and on a bridge nonetheless, I would be terrified.
terrified.
Number 6. Old Chestnut Grove Cemetery. The story goes a woman accused of witchcraft was executed and buried at the cemetery. The townsfolk did not erect a marker, but instead built an iron fence around her grave, which was next to an old tree. An indentation next to the tree inside the fence marks her grave, and it's said that bad things will happen to those who get close to her grave. Another variation of the story says that several witches were executed and buried here, and their ghosts continue to haunt this area, which does not shock me. Not only did this happen, but on December 29, 1876, the number 5 Pacific Express was traveling over a high bridge, carrying approximately 159 passengers and crew when the bridge collapsed. It sent the train and the people on it into the ravine below, and 92 people died. Many were burned alive while trapped inside the crushed cars and are buried in a mass grave at this cemetery. Due to this, people have seen ghosts of the passengers, and unexplained voices on tape have been recorded. Number 5. Malsalon Public Library. Let me just say, there's more than books in this building. Before it was a library, it was a house, and former residents Clara Baldwin Barrick and Annie Baldwin both died in the home. Clara lived in the home from 1895 to 1909, and her daughter-in-law Annie died in the home in 1931. This might explain why this place is haunted. Some visitors have heard footsteps or smelt an unfamiliar perfume. Employees get a chill with no explanation in the outreach room located in the basement of the former home. A patron once claimed to have been pushed by an apparition while in the library, and a security camera in the library caught the elevator traveling to the 3rd floor at 3 a.m. The doors opened and a bright light could be seen, and the phenomena has been caught on tape several times, and there is no explanation, and that is just like an immediate no. Director Sherry Brown, who has worked at the library since 1979, said she was working in her office, a former bedroom of the home, after the library closed when she thought she saw an employee walk past her office door. She yelled out but got no answer. When she investigated, she found no one. Paranormal investigators have conducted research in the library and have gotten responses from the ghosts during electronic voice phenomenon sessions, and if you thought libraries were boring, let me just say this one definitely isn't. Number 4. Lock 4 Park. An incident occurred here in 1857 which has resulted in the park being haunted. A canal worker, whom some say was the lock tender, may have been angry about the potential of work being shut down and wanted revenge. The angry worker doused his fellow workers with a container of acid or some type of caustic liquid. It said the enraged worker tossed the lid open and flung the contents on his fellow workers, dumping the remnants on himself. Legend states that no immediate deaths ensued, but rather the men suffered gruesome, slower deaths that took several days. A few men perished due to their acid-eaten skin and organs. The man responsible also died. Today, screams and moans of those who were burned by the acid supposedly can still be heard by some if they listen closely while visiting Lock 4 Park. Also, the lock tender's cabin, which is located in the park, may also be haunted by the spirit of the angry worker. Number 3. Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle is reported to be the most haunted house in Ohio. Rumors about the Eerie Castle began to surface after multiple deaths occurred in the Tiedemann family while living in the mansion. The home was built in 1883 by Haynes Tiedemann, a banker and co-founder of the Union Banking and Savings Company. And let me just add that the house has 4 stories and more than 20 rooms and 80 windows. Now, Haynes allegedly tore down another house on the property where 4 of his children had died. His first wife, Lucia, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s. The American businessman would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they encountered a crying girl in white on the 3rd floor. But when Miss Romano investigated, no one was there. Soon, the family started hearing haunting organ music and heavy footsteps. 2 of the older Romano children woke up one night to find something yanking the blankets off their bed, and Miss Romano once awoke to find herself screaming on her bedroom floor with an unseen presence screaming beside her. A priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did. But the hauntings didn't stop when the Romanos left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Since reports of hauntings at Franklin's Castle increased, many turned their suspicions onto its original owner. Number 2. Sister Century House Restaurant. Now a restaurant, this building has seen a lot in the past. It was built in 1870 and has been home to several businesses in historic Canal Fulton throughout the years. It currently houses a family-owned restaurant, but was most notably home to a crematorium, which was located in the basement back in the early 1900s. I mean, since this place was once filled with dead people, it's no shock that it's haunted. There have been rumors of shadow people, a poltergeist in the kitchen, ghostly ladies in the basement, the entrance to an old tunnel, and even an unusual room that makes people a bit dizzy. The food though seems to be great, as the restaurant has a 4.6 star rating, so if you want to see some ghosts and have a great meal, I suggest you check this place out. And coming in at number 1, the Ohio State Reformatory. The Ohio State Reformatory opened its doors on September 15, 1896 to its first 150 offenders. These prisoners were brought by train from Columbus and put immediately to work on the prison sewer system in the 25-foot stone walls surrounding the complex. The reformatory remained in full operation until December 1990, when it was closed via federal court order as a result of a prisoner's class action suit citing overcrowding and inhumane conditions. For example, in the late 1930s, a riot broke out in the East Cell Block. The guards condemned 120 rioters to share 12 solitary confinement cells for 1 week without food or water. This punishment drove many to the brink of madness and death. During its 94 years as a working prison, 154,000 inmates passed through the gates of the Ohio State Reformatory. Many died of diseases like influenza and tuberculosis, some went mad, others ended their lives, and at least one inmate lit himself on fire. Just outside the reformatory, there are 215 numbered graves. While visiting, people have reported being pushed and punched by unseen forces. Many claim to feel a chill while on the prison grounds. People have also heard cell doors slam shut and seen dark apparitions. Even the road leading to the Ohio State Reformatory seems to be haunted. Local legend suggests it's the ghost of Phoebe Wise, a notorious hermit and eccentric.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Breavel's Castle in Gloucester. I don't know, if I said that wrong, remove some letters. I don't know what to tell you. Breavel's Castle is a ruined Norman fortress located in the Forest of Dean, and over the years the castle has been the subject of many haunting tales and ghostly sightings. One of the most famous stories of that is the White Lady, who is said to haunt the castle. According to legend, she is the ghost of a woman who was wrongly accused of stealing from the castle and was subsequently executed. Her ghost has been reported to roam the castle's halls and corridors, and she has been seen by many visitors and staff members. Another famous ghostly tale from the castle is that of the Phantom Coach, who is said to drive up to the castle gates before disappearing without a trace. Legend has it that the coach is driven by the ghost of a former owner of the castle who was killed by his own wife and her lover. In addition to these tales, there have also been reports of unexplained noises and strange apparitions throughout the castle. Despite the many stories of ghosts and hauntings, this castle remains a popular tourist destination and a fascinating piece of British history. Why not head over for a visit? I heard you can even stay in the oubliette. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Glasgow Necropolis. This place is exactly what it sounds like. It is a necropolis, and what place is more haunted than a necropolis? The Glasgow Necropolis is a Victorian cemetery located on a hill overlooking Glasgow, Scotland. Over the years, it has become a popular spot for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts due to the many haunting tales that surround the site. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the necropolis is that of a female ghost. According to legend, she is the ghost of a wealthy woman who was buried in a white dress and veil. Her ghost has been seen by many visitors floating among the tombstones and crypts. Another tale involves the ghost of a man who was buried alive. Legend has it that he woke up in his coffin and tried to escape but died before he could make it out. Visitors have reported hearing knocking sounds coming from the ground and feeling cold spots near his grave. At the end of the day, while there are thousands of people buried here, only a small group have gravestones and even fewer have names. This only adds to the eerie nature of the cemetery. There are even rumors that a vampire
just might be wandering the grounds looking for its next prey. All in all, this place is full of haunting tales, urban legends, and a whole bunch of spook. In our number 8 spot today, we have Pluckley in Kent. The village of Pluckley, located in the county of Kent, England, is known for being one of the most haunted villages in the entire country. There are numerous ghost stories associated with the village, many of which have been passed down through generations. One of the most famous tales is that of the Screaming Woods, a dense forest area on the outskirts of the village. According to legend, the woods are haunted by the ghost of a highwayman who was caught and killed by villagers, and his screams can still be heard at night. Another famous ghost story involves the Watercress Woman, a ghostly figure who is said to appear near a stream in the village, carrying a basket of watercress on her arm. It is believed that she drowned in the stream while picking watercress, and her ghost has been seen by many villagers over the years. Other reported sightings include ghosts of a monk, a schoolmaster, and even a haunted pub. Despite the spooky tales, Pluckley remains a charming and picturesque village, attracting visitors from around the world. Visit if you dare. In our number 7 spot today, we have Chillingham Castle in Northumberland. Chillingham Castle, located in Northumberland, England, is considered to be one of the most haunted castles in the country. The castle has a dark and mysterious history, and there have been numerous reports of paranormal activity over the years. One of the most famous ghosts associated with the castle is the Blue Boy. According to legend, the ghost is a spirit of a young man who was imprisoned in a room in the castle and left to die. His ghost has been seen by many visitors, appearing as a blue flash of light or as a boy dressed in blue clothing. Another famous tale is that of a specific room in the castle where prisoners were once harmed and then executed. Visitors have reported feeling cold spots, hearing unexplained noises, and even feeling the presence of the ghosts of the tormented prisoners. Other reported sightings include ghosts of a lady in white, a soldier, and even a ghostly cat. In our number 6 spot today, we have Corfe Castle. Corfe Castle, located in Dorset, England, is a ruined fortress with a rich history and many ghostly tales. The castle was originally built in the 11th century and was destroyed during the English Civil War in the 17th century. One of the most famous ghosts associated with the castle is that of Lady Banks, the wife of the castle's owner during the Civil War. According to legend, she defended the castle against enemy soldiers and was killed during the siege. Her ghost has been seen wandering the castle ruins, dressed in a long white gown. Another famous tale is that of the Drummer Boy, a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the castle gatehouse. According to legend, the boy was caught spying on enemy soldiers, and this swiftly led to his demise. His ghost has been seen and heard drumming his sticks on the castle walls. As you walk up the steps to the castle, you might also learn about Edward the Martyr, who was set to be king until he also lost his life here at the hands of his own stepmother, who wanted her own birth son to be the heir to the throne. Other reported sightings include ghosts of soldiers, knights, and even a headless woman. Didn't see that one coming. In our number 5 spot today, we have Whitby Abbey, North Yorkshire. Whitby Abbey is a ruined Gothic abbey located in the seaside town of Whitby, North Yorkshire in England, and upon looking at it, it totally makes sense why people say this was part of the inspiration for Dracula. The abbey has a rich history and has been the subject of many haunting tales over the years. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the abbey is that of the Whitby Abbey ghost. Of course. According to legend, the ghost is the spirit of a young woman who fell to her death from the abbey's high tower while trying to escape her angry husband. Her ghost has been seen wandering the abbey ruins, dressed in a white dress. Ghosts really seem to vibe with white dresses for some reason. Another famous tale is that of the Black Abbot, a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the abbey's grounds. According to legend, the Black Abbot was a former abbot of the monastery who was executed for his crimes. His ghost has been seen wearing a black robe and carrying a book. Other reported sightings include ghosts of monks, nuns, and even a ghostly dog. Despite the many spooky tales, Whitby Abbey remains a popular tourist destination, offering visitors a glimpse into the fascinating history of the abbey and the paranormal activity associated with it. In our number 4 spot today, we have Glencoe, Argyll. Glencoe is a beautiful and rugged valley located in the Argyll region of Scotland, and is pretty famous for being one of the settings in the Bond film Skyfall, but it's also famous for its haunting tales. The area is steeped in history, and it all starts back in 1692 with what is known as the Massacre of Glencoe. In that year, soldiers loyal to the English crown killed members of the MacDonald clan
man who had been hosting them as guests. It is said that the ghosts of the lost McDonald's still haunt the valley, seeking revenge on their killers. Another famous tale is that of the Gray Man. According to legend, the Gray Man is a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the summits of the mountains in Glencoe. His ghostly presence has been reported by many climbers and hikers over the years. In our number 3 spot today, we have Highgate Cemetery, London. This cemetery is located in London, and for years it has been the central point of many a horrific tale. These stories include those of demons, ghosts, and all things paranormal, and even the famous Highgate vampire. Legend goes that the cemetery is home to this vampire, as first reported by 2 girls walking through the area. They claimed to see the dead rise from their graves. Soon after this report came the discovery of animal carcasses, which is never a good sign, but to make matters worse, all of these ones had been drained of their blood. Stories of the vampire spread like wildfire, and people were rightfully pretty creeped out. This all led to the vampire hunt that took place on Friday, April 13th, 1973. Friday the 13th. It's never good. During this hunt, residents of the town began exhuming bodies and then also beheading them. Okay? There are still many rumors and stories that swirl around the area, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say, if the gates to hell weren't located here before the beheadings, they definitely are now. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Skirrid Inn in Wales. I love visiting a place that has lots of history. You know, when you enter a building and can learn about its history and the people who used to walk in its halls, it's just so interesting and very cool, except for when you're sipping away on a cold tasty pint and find out that where you're sitting is a place that used to be used for public hangings. Yeah, things get a bit more grim when you bring that story up, alright? I don't know if I want what's on those taps. That is exactly the history behind the Skirrid Inn. The upper area of the pub was once used as a courthouse where people would stand trial. If the person on trial was convicted and sentenced to death, I guess this place was super convenient because they also wouldn't have to waste any time and could just carry out the sentence right then and there. A bit dark, I'd say. The bar decided it would keep the creepy little cell that was once used to hold the prisoners, which seems like an odd choice, but I guess it's all in the name of history. It is estimated that around 180 executions took place here, and to this day you can still take a peek at the hanging beam that was used way back when. Not exactly sure I'd want to, as there's no way that thing isn't cursed. Many people who have been to the bar state that they have felt things like a sudden drop in temperature, the feeling of a rope around their neck, or even seeing some strange, scary, shadowy figures. I got a strange feeling that if you were to head into the cell that's still around, you just might find yourself in a place that you don't want to go to. In our number 1 spot today, we have Blickling Hall in Norfolk. Blickling Hall, located in Norfolk, England, is a beautiful, stately home that dates back to the 15th century, and it has been the subject of numerous reported ghost sightings and paranormal activity. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the hall is that of the Anne Boleyn ghost. According to legend, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, was born at Blickling Hall, and her ghost is said to haunt the property. Her ghost has been seen wearing a white dress and carrying her own severed head. That is really about as haunting as it gets. Apparently, on the anniversary of her execution, people have reported seeing Anne ride up to the estate in a ghostly carriage, driven by a man who is also headless. Another famous tale is that of the Screaming Lady. It is said that a lady who was killed in the hall has been heard screaming in the corridors at night. The estate is now owned by the National Trust because no one else would want to buy that haunted of a house, and it remains a popular spot for those interested in history as well as the paranormal.
Number 9. La Plaza Mansion. The La Plaza Mansion is a now abandoned, allegedly haunted mansion in Las Vegas that was once home to a notorious mobster known as Tony the Ant Spilotra. Over the years, there has been a score of rumors and hearsay out of the Plaza Mansion as to what kind of violence has happened inside those walls and inside the secret tunnels that are built underneath it, as well as the secret rooms around. It makes a good sense that a place where mobsters would meet and greet probably saw its fair share of dark dealings. Various inhabitants over the years have complained of spirits on multiple occasions. One particular vivid story details someone being choked after a glass of wine exploded mysteriously. As well, female guests have reported hearing hooting and hollering while showering at the Plaza Mansion. Pervert ghosts. Yeah, learn something every day. The mansion is closed, but it recently went up for sale again, but it's been struggling to find a buyer. I guess no one really wants to buy a home where you know a ghost is going to be watching you use the loofah. Number 8. The Flamingo Resort. The Flamingo was the prized property and hotel of Bugsy Siegel, the legendary New York mobster who was the undisputed first king of Las Vegas, as he was influential and key to the development of the Las Vegas Strip, becoming the beloved den of sin that we know today. Unfortunately for Bugsy, he didn't get to enjoy his time with his precious flamingo very long, as he was assassinated by a rifle in his own home 6 months after its grand opening. Well, if you believe the rumors, maybe Bugsy keeps finding his way back to his favorite spot, as there are reports of all sorts of sightings of that checkered coat. Fun little aside, little trivia for some of the gamers out there, the villain of Fallout New Vegas, Benny, was directly based on Bugsy, down to the trademark jacket. Anyway, guests of the Flamingo Hotel have reported hearing strange whisperings at night during their rooms, and claim that spectral apparitions have been seen in the presidential suite, Bugsy's old personal room in the hotel. There have been reports of seeing the notorious criminal in the garden as well as the chapel. Perhaps he's still got unfinished hotel business to take care of, or maybe he just loves that spot so much he can't move. Number 6. The Mob Museum. Hey, there ain't nothing to see here. Move along at this one. There's nothing to see at point number 6. Well, actually there is. Quite a lot. The Mob Museum is a showcase to the people that made Las Vegas what it is today. Gangsters, crooks, criminals, and all. The museum serves as a monument to all things crooked and corrupt, and is built in the old Las Vegas courthouse, where several of the people who are featured in the museum received the sentence that would change their lives, so to speak. As well, one of the most prominent features of the museum is a swath of the brick wall from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, still riddled with bullet holes from the infamous Bloody Clash. Employees who work at the Mob Museum claim that in their time, it's not uncommon to see shadowy figures wandering through at night, quite possibly the lost souls of old mobsters who never got a peaceful rest, probably due to, being perforated by bullets. Number 5. The Luxor Resort. The Luxor Resort has been host to paranormal rumors pretty much since it was constructed. Maybe it's because it was built to look like an ancient Egyptian tomb. Maybe it's the gigantic black pyramid with a giant light atop its peak that looks like it's a dark temple that's attracting all of the malevolent energy in the world inside the Luxor. Could be that. An unknown number of construction workers died during its construction, and shortly after its opening, 2 guests jumped from the balconies. You should know too as well, the Luxor is also home to a massive collection of artifacts recovered from the wreck of the Titanic, all the way up to a giant piece of the bulkhead complete with a piece of the window. You gotta imagine if there wasn't already enough evil energy inside that building, bringing in a bunch of relics from the Titanic has gotta push it overboard. No pun intended, wow. Employees have reported that deceased passengers from the Titanic came with their relics, appearing, disappearing, and making their presence known. Some rooms of the resort are even modeled directly after rooms in the Titanic, where people report increased spiritual activity. Maybe they feel at home. Number 4. Fox Ridge Park. It's not all glitz and grime all the time in Las Vegas. There still has to be a community, The people have to live somewhere. Can't all just be wall-to-wall casinos. There has to be room for grocery stores and places for people to play. Perhaps once you've had your fill of shooting craps, you can take a walk down to Fox Ridge Park, a small little playground in Henderson, the city that neighbors Las Vegas. The story goes that a long time past, a boy was run over by the park, and his soul has been bound to it ever since. People report seeing the swing set moving when no one's around, or no wind could be blowing it, and even outright saying that they see spectral apparitions. He's apparently very angry, however, and I never quite got over his condition, and it's been said that he takes the form of a demonic entity, or some monstrous specter to would-be paranormal investigators who go and disturb him. So it might be best to leave this one to the pros and check out some of the other stuff on the list. Tell Zach Baggins about this one. Number 3. Rhyolite Ghost Town. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll go through it anyway. After you've made a day seeing the sights of Las Vegas, consider taking a road trip outside of the Strip to Rhyolite, an abandoned ghost town just outside. It used to be a prospering mining community during the gold rush, but was abandoned altogether in the panic of 1907. It still stands now as a monument to an America long gone, a town frozen in amber, perfectly preserved. Even just looking at it, pictures of it is kind of giving me the willies, You look at it and it feels like things should be moving and bustling, but instead it's just a graveyard. You can wander around the remnants of the old town, seeing the desolate ruins of a bank and a jail. Because of its eerie, abandoned nature, it's a very popular spot for paranormal enthusiasts to scout out to try and see if maybe, just maybe, they can catch a bona fide ghostly gunslinger or vanquished varmint still wandering around on this mortal coil. And finally, the #1 most haunted spot in Vegas is Bally's Las Vegas Resort. In 1980, a raging fire scorched the tower of the original MGM Grand Resort. It was an absolutely dreadful disaster that claimed the lives of 85 people and badly injured many more. The building was restored and sold and renamed to Bally's in 1985. But given the building's treacherous backstory, it's no surprise how many guests complain about paranormal experiences there. Guests who stay in the original refurbished tower complain of overwhelming smell of smoke or the sounds of people screaming throughout the night. Others notice that on higher floors, the furniture will move unexpectedly, or windows have been shut or even locked that can be found open. It's thought that these are the spirits of those on the higher floors desperate to escape, not knowing they never will. There's a famous ghost in Bally's, residents claim to see, of an old woman who sits at a slot machine on the casino floor, blankly pulling the lever and idly playing calmly until she bursts into flames without making a noise, and then vanishing in the blink of an eye. She only appears for seconds at a time, but she's been purportedly seen many times. Ugh.